I call the meeting of the Ordinance Committee to order, this being Tuesday, December 11th at 6:34. With me, I have Counselor Juan Anderson Burgos. I'm Counselor Linda Vacon, and kindly, Counselor Joe McGiverin has joined us to form a quorum. Relative to the meeting minutes, we just received those today, so we can leave those on the table. For item 2, I'd accept a motion to take up item 2 and open the public hearing.
Make a motion to open the public hearing on item number 2.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 2 is a public hearing for a zone change application submitted by Tom Adamczyk for property on 15 Holy Family Road, map 117, block 00, parcel 019, from current zone R1A to proposed zone RM20. So if folks can come forth, just give us your name and address, and this is being televised, so people at home can understand what's going on at the meeting also. And then we would be most interested to hear an overview and any details underlying your zone change request that you'd like to bring to our attention. You can use the microphone on the desk there, or that other one does come out of the sleeve. Bless you.
Thank you.
No kidding. The green light needs, there you go.
Thank you. Hi, Joe.
Oh,
Dave's on the committee, right?
yeah. Yes.
Before we start, I'm on the sit
Okay.
down, so I don't have to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
David, no.
We just opened, we didn't even start.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
I would have given you a couple more minutes, but I saw the 10 on your text.
Yeah.
So I went.
No, I'm
You're good.
actually made it faster than I
You
thought.
Counselor Dave Bartley, member of the committee, has joined us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson Bacon and councilors. For the record, I'm Rob Levesque from our Levesque Associates, here this evening representing Rob and Bob and Tom Adamczyk for the proposed zoning map amendment or zone change request at 15 Holy Family Road. The subject property is directly across from the Donahue School. I have a map here that shows Tokaniki just to the north. We have Holy Family Road right here on our plan. This is the Vacon property. If everybody's familiar with the Vacon property, in front of Mount St. Vincent, which would be just off to the back of the property. What we're proposing to do is change the zoning from Residence A to RM20. RM20 allows for multifamily. Under the current zoning, we're only allowed to do on the subject property single-family home. The Adamczyk brothers have a purchase and sale agreement with the Diocese of Springfield to purchase the property for this use. We're looking to do 100 multifamily units. I know that this is for the zone change and we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we did want you to know that we have done some preliminary work on the property just to understand the feasibility not only of services to the site. We have done a trip generation analysis associated with this to understand the traffic associated with the project. This is a rendering of what they would be contemplating. So the 100 units would be separated in approximately three buildings, and then would be serviced with an access road. And this is a little site plan here that might help a little bit. So Holy Family Road is here. We would have access around the back of the property. There would be parking, common parking areas for each of the buildings, handicapped accessibility. We've looked very closely at the RM20 zoning district. It works very well for us. It allows us to utilize the 6 acres, the open space calculations that are required, and all of the details when we get to that site planning portion of the project work out quite well. It's almost ideal the way the geometry of the site works. and how the calculations worked out. So this area that you see in the middle would all be green space, as well as these areas here would be green space. And we are contemplating whether or not potentially a playscape or some sort of other amenities up in this area would be appropriate. So we actually had a neighborhood meeting on this, which went well. We did speak with the folks from Devonshire who really are happy about where they live, and they take pride in their community there. And they were nice enough to come out and speak to us about what works for them and what doesn't. So we had some really nice indication of what works in these apartments and what they like about where they live. So that was helpful. And I think what I'd like to do is, ask you guys if you have any questions. The proponents are here this evening to answer any questions you have about the specifics of the units. But I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Questions? I'm sorry? Well, I thought what I would do is also go with the public, and then we'll come back. How's that? So if there are people here on this public hearing relative to the zone change who wish to speak to it, now would be a great time. All you need to do is come to the microphone, give your name and address, and you can ask a question, you can put forth an opinion, or a concern.
John,
Can
the
you
mic's
just
not on.
pull the switch to make sure the mic's on?
Now it's on? Okay.
Thank you.
John Wazalowski, CFO and Director of Operations for the Sisters of Providence at 5 Gamlin Street, Holyoke. And we just got the notice about the hearing and and as owners of Mount St. Vincent Nursing Home, have not had any opportunity to take a look as to what the impact might be on traffic flow or the change in the zoning and the large population of folks in that area that currently don't exist. So we'd like to have a little bit of an opportunity to review some of the studies and the impact that the buildings would have on the surrounding area, including our property.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Bartley?
Rob, you want?
If you have some information that you want to put forth into the public hearing relative to that.
Yeah, I want to address that for now.
Yeah, that would be great. So first of all, we would be happy to communicate with your group, making sure that you understand what we're proposing. As far as the access to our site, we're not planning on utilizing the same, they have an access point directly adjacent to our site through, we'll call it a right-of-way, or it's owned in fee by them, but it basically looks like a right-of-way. So our entrances would be independent. We do anticipate having, generating traffic at this site. We have had McMahon Associates take a look at that, and they've done a preliminary trip generation analysis based on our proposed use, and that analysis has basically come back, and we do not anticipate any negative impacts on the surrounding intersections, but we would obviously, through the site planning process, be required to do an additional traffic study, kind of take that a little bit further, or a lot further really, and look at the surrounding intersections, which we would absolutely anticipate. As far as the questions about the actual site development and how that will take place, timing, critical path, and all the permitting, that will all be done through the planning board if we get to that point. The first step is really for us to get the zone change, and we are absolutely happy to communicate between now and if there's another meeting before this committee, we would certainly be willing to do that as well.
Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, John, is that the right-hand turn into Mount St. Vincent? Is that street named? I can't tell you for sure. I don't know the street name if it is one, so I just want to identify it. So there's no street. Okay.
It's a driveway.
So it's just kind of a driveway leading up there, as Councilor Vacon rightly said. Rob, the buffer, so that's Tokaniki Road in front of us? I mean, that's right, that's Holy Family Way in front of us, right on the map?
Yeah, that's Holy Family Way. Probably the best. I do have, it's going to be a little bit difficult to read, but this is the zoning map. So to give you some overall context, so the subject property is here, right here. Mount St. Vincent is directly behind. They have the access that we had talked about right here along the edge of the property. Tokeniki is this yellow area. There's zoned RM20 as well. This is Devonshire right here, right here. And then this is the geriatric authority.
And how are you proposing that people enter the development?
So this is Holy Family Road right here. We would have an access point on this side of the site and on this side of the site, and we have a loop within our internal circulation loop within our.
Okay, so both access points are
Off of Holy Family.
off of Holy Family. Okay, so that would be a potential condition we could have. Then the buffer, and you gotta use your mic too, don't forget that. The buffer between your proposed development and Mount St. Vincent's, what are you proposing?
There's a specific requirement for buffering,
Okay.
and I'm trying to find that. We would do at least what's required around the perimeter. I believe it was a 15-foot landscape buffer that was required. I would have to confirm that, and we certainly would need to meet that criteria or any other criteria of the planning department. But right now, the site is, I'd call it secondary successional species. You know, it's regrowth vegetation. It's been cleared in the past. There's some scrub vegetation out there. I would anticipate that significant landscaping along the perimeter would be part of the landscape plan for the project when we get to the site planning process.
And this does trip site plan review?
Absolutely.
And then, assuming that everyone moves as expeditiously as the chairwoman does with the zone change, you go to site plan review, and then you're hopeful to have, if everything goes well with the abutters and all that, you're hopeful to have development commence when?
Ideally, and we don't want to be presumptuous, but ideally in the spring, early summer would be perfect.
For this coming year?
Yeah, so we
Okay.
would, if we do in fact have a zone change in place, that would put us in a position to submit to the planning board late winter, early spring, and then, construction shortly thereafter.
And you're anticipating market rent units?
That is correct.
Okay, and the number of bedrooms in each, what are the developers proposing?
I believe it was ones and twos. I don't, do you
Tentatively 76 one-bedroom.
come up to the mic, sorry.
Hi, I'm Tom Adamczyk. Right now, the plans call for 76 one-bedroom and 24 two-bedroom.
Okay, and Tom, how'd you come up with that number?
In working in conjunction with Rob, the coverage of the lot that we could use, the size units that we could use, and trying to meet all the planning board criteria or zoning criteria.
Okay, so 100 units is your,
100 units is what it worked out to be.
all right. And then, so with the buffer, you should be aware that the city of Holyoke now has its own nursery, and we have, and that was proposed here in this body. So I like to make that known. It wasn't proposed anywhere else. It was proposed right here in City Council. And we have our own nursery, which is located on Berkshire Street in the Springdale section. And there are now approximately 400 trees ready to be transplanted. And those trees are available to the public. They can be planted in residential lots. They can be planted in commercial lots. They can be planted on public rights-of-way. And you should be aware of that, because that might be a nice amenity to your development, but the public in general should be aware of this as well. And by the way, this whole nursery didn't cost the city a nickel, so we'll add that to the little speech. Yay me! And then okay, I think that was it right now. I'm just going to make one other comment,
Yes,
if
sir.
I could, Rob. The seller on this is the Diocese of Springfield, and I just want it known that I am just so impressed by the Adamczyk's presentation. And Mr. Levesque has been before us, I would say 4 or 5 different occasions on different boards with different projects. Obviously, I respect and admire him. That I would generally be. I am in favor of this. I am going to vote. I expect to vote for this whenever the chair leader wants to put it to a vote. I'm just going to say it for the record that I don't care how you feel about this, but the Diocese of Springfield is good. Diocese of Springfield is going to get a check for this. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be a handsome check, knowing the Diocese of Springfield. It's going to be a very handsome check. I'm going to suggest it's going to be in the six-figure range. I don't know what the number is, but I know it'll be a handsome check to the Diocese of Springfield. And this is the same diocese that is sticking it to the city of Holyoke with what's going on at Chestnut Street. So if we wanted to have a little cabal here and stop this, to stick it to the diocese, like the diocese is sticking it to the city of Holyoke, I might think about being in favor of that, but I cannot be in favor of that because of this project here, and the Adamczyks have done so much work, and we're so excited and happy about development in Holyoke. And this is working with wonderful partners that are coming in and want to make Holyoke better. Unlike the Diocese of Springfield that wants to collect another check from the city of Holyoke, like the $18 million they already pocketed from the church that burned down, and they just started the demo. Half the building down there at Mar del Rosa is demoed right now. That's what the Diocese of Springfield is all about. And this is from, by the way, a practicing Catholic who goes to Blessed Sacrament on a regular basis. So I am not talking out of school here, but for the betterment of Holyoke and Ward 5, I'm certainly going to support this, and I really welcome you to the city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Bartley. So from a procedural point of view, I just want to run down this process. My understanding is that the public hearing, which takes place in planning as a part of a zone change review, has been continued to January 8th. I'm not certain why. I don't know if there was an issue with the quorum or what, but it has been continued to January 8th. As part of our process, once we understand the project, well, we don't need to understand the project, to be clear. We are really here looking at the use that will occur under a zone change and seeing if it's compatible, appropriate, and works in the area in which it is sought. We often do hear about proposed projects, but that is not what we are voting on when we will be making a recommendation to the council on this matter. So part of the process is that the planning board will be making a recommendation to this committee before we take a vote on the zone change. So I'm happy to entertain any other questions or input that anybody wishes to make at this time. If I'm not hearing any, then I would entertain a motion to continue this to January 8th so that we can keep things
Do you want to speak, Rhoda?
in sync. But
Did we allow the public just an opportunity?
we did.
Oh, yeah.
So then, sure.
We did. And if there is anybody else who wishes to speak now that you've heard some more information, you may also speak at this point if you wish. Counselor Sullivan.
Yeah, I just have a question. What's the proposed value of this development, and do you have any numbers what the tax impact would be for the city?
I would defer to the proponent. And that's not my cup of tea, but maybe I have an idea.
At this stage, we haven't proceeded with any architectural drawings or complete engineering. We're waiting to get the approval on a zone change before we would get into planning. So without any plans, we really haven't been able to do a budget yet.
You don't even have an estimate of the approximate value of the development?
I would probably say in the $10 million range.
Okay, thank you.
They did say 100 units, just as part of the
Yep.
earlier information. Okay, not seeing anyone else who wishes to speak.
Motion to table. To January
To
8th,
continue.
motion to continue the public hearing to January 8th, 2019 at 6:30 PM.
Second.
All in,
Just out of curiosity. Sorry, did we hear from the president yet if we were meeting as a full body on the 8th, or is the 8th available for us to meet?
we have not, he's seeking input, and we're going to decide at the next city council meeting, but I did advise him that we already had things planned for the 8th for this committee.
Sure. Okay, so then the 8th at 6:30, second.
Okay.
Yeah.
All in favor? Aye. So this public hearing is continued to January 8th at 6:30, same location. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it, councilors.
If possible, we have Mike McManus here, who's here on 3 or 4 different items.
Do we want to take
We
care
could
of the?
go.
Did you
out
do
of
the Boston Bud or?
What numbers are they?
That's going to be longer, I think.
You think it's going to be longer than the sewer rate?
Let's give Mike a, where's, is Mike here?
Yes, yeah, so if the committee is willing, what I would like to do is go out of order for
This one,
5, 6, 7, and 10, under which I'm not necessarily anticipating there will be lengthy discussion, because,
Okay,
Thank
motion
you.
to suspend rules, go out of order and take as a package items 5, 6, 7, and 10.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay. Item 5 is a continuation of the public hearing on the amendment of the sewer rate, adjusting the deficit within the sewer budget. Item 6 goes along directly with item 5, which is my order filed in November that an update on the sewer collections be provided before a rate increase is considered. And at the initial public hearing, we had asked for some updated figures. And I would note that since our last public hearing, we did get our free cash certified, which did show us the deficit in the sewer enterprise fund of around $33,000. So, Mr. McManus is here tonight, so I'll let you take the mic. How's
Sure.
that?
So I've handed out an update with some additional information from the last time. Last time the recommendation, there were two recommendations, two choices. One is to eliminate the $5 minimum completely and increase the rate $1.25 to $6.40 per 1,000 gallons. I'm sorry, $6.65 per 1,000 gallons. And the other option would be to increase the minimum consumption to 10,000 gallons and a sewer rate increase of $1 to $6.40 per gallon. And then the question by the body was, what effect would that have on the different types of users in the city? So on the second page, there's a couple of tables. The first table, this is the impact that would happen to people who are currently paying a $5 minimum. So right now, there's a little less than 300 accounts that pay a $5 minimum every quarter. So their annual bill is $20 per year for sewer use. In bold are the two recommendations, but then there's other options just for consideration of what would happen to that minimum bill. But if we eliminated the minimum completely and raised the sewer rate to $6.65 per 1,000 gallon, those people, their minimum bill, their annual minimum bill would go up to an average of $33.12. And if we went with the other option, where we set the minimum at 10,000 gallons with a sewer rate of $6.40 per 1,000 gallons, their annual bill would be $256. So there is a significant increase for those users from what they're seeing right now. And this is for about 300 accounts. There's a hair over 6,000 total accounts within the city. The second table would be the impact to all other residential accounts. So those are the residential properties that don't pay the $5 minimum. They pay something a little bit more than the $5 minimum. There's a hair under 6,000 accounts. But right now, the average residential bill is around $382 per year. If we eliminated the minimum and raised the sewer rate to $6.65, their average annual bill would go up to $471.50 about a 23% increase. And if we set a 10,000 gallon minimum and a sewer rate of $6.40, their annual bill would go up to $481, or about a 25.7% increase. And the goal of those two recommendations, the no minimum or the $6.65 per 1,000 gallons, or the 10,000 gallon minimum with a $6.40 rate, is to generate enough revenue to cover all of the expenses associated with the sewer fund, so that there wouldn't be any deficit at the end of the year.
So how much more money does this raise in a year, the increase?
It would we estimate that it would raise about $1.4 million.
So can you help us out with the numbers? Because I was expecting the deficit in the sewer fund to be much greater than it was on the free cash.
It
Summary?
is.
So can you help
Because
us out with that?
Yeah, so the way the budgets work, at least the way the auditors explain it to me, is at the end of the year, the city looks at all of the receivables and all of the expenses, and the sewer account is included in those expenses. And the accountants move money as needed to come up with so that the additional receivables then pay for the expenses. So even though there was $30,000 in free cash that went to the deficit, there was a lot more that went to cover the sewer deficit than that $30,000.
Can we see that number somewhere?
So on
Is that on your sheet?
on the last page, table 6, historical sewer account deficit. These are numbers that I had gotten from the auditor.
Okay.
It goes back to fiscal year 14, and in one column we have the revenue that was generated through the sewer rates. The next column is the expense, and the third column is the deficit. And you can see that the deficit varies per year, but it averages out to about $800,000 per year is the sewer deficit, and that's covered by the general fund.
So is the revenue that's projected here for 2019 including all of the collections?
No. Well, it's including collections, but it's not including any
Rate
sewer rate increase.
changes.
Correct.
So to the extent that the notice program has been implemented, has it gone through all full cycle yet?
It has, yes.
And so that increased the collection rate, I thought, up into the 90s something
It did.
percentile?
Correct. But even though we're collecting more money, there's still a structural deficit
Right.
in the fund because the rate is lower than what it
Right.
should be.
Right, but I'm just interested to know what the collection rate went from and to. I mean, I know you've provided it for us, but I'm just wanting to have it sort of all summarized.
Okay. I would say generally it's in the mid-90s.
So the collection rate is now in the mid-90s, and a year or two ago, what was it, in the 80s something?
70 to 80.
70 to 80%?
We still have accounts that will get liened
Right.
at the end of the year. It's not as many accounts that will be liened. And we're not going to lien all of the accounts that we would normally lien. We're going to leave some off the liens so that once the sewer shutoff program starts next year, we'll be able to force the collection of those instead of waiting for possible payment of the lien.
Right, which could be 20 years, right?
Right.
Are there members of the committee that have questions? Are there members of the public who wish to either ask a question or address the committee relative to a possible change in the sewer rate? Counselor McGiverin?
If I could address the committee, if there's no one in the public, I would encourage the committee to try to resolve this tonight and put something in front of the city council for next week. It's my understanding that if we do vote on a increase by next Tuesday, there's a very good chance that the third quarter billing, I believe it is, Mike, would include the new increase, which would mean additional revenues for this fiscal year, which would mean less of a deficit. I knew the deficits were bad, but these numbers I heard tonight are devastating. $800,000 a year, $1.4 million last year, which is the impact on our budget this year, is incredible in terms of what we're trying to do with the city side of the budget. Our ability to help ourselves and to stop the bleeding is right in front of us. We've asked the city, the DPW, to go after the people who were not paying their bills, to go after the arrears that were collectible. We've heard it now 3 times since the water department helped us out with the ability to shut off water. And now we know that the good foot of the city has stepped forward, and those monies are coming back in at a much higher rate than anyone could have expected, getting into the 90% range. None of us want to pay for this sewer rate. It's an unfunded mandate by the federal government, but it's the right thing to do in terms of cleaning up the Connecticut River. And it should not be coming out of property tax and other city revenues. Those revenues should be set aside for police, fire, DPW, schools, and parks and rec, and so on. It's time to address this. It's time to address it where it makes sense to put the sewer fund itself into the black and to let it operate as it was intended to be by user rate. I'm hoping the committee could do this so that we could take advantage of the next billing cycle.
To piggyback on Joe's comment, we did talk with the water department. They're the ones who generate the bills and send the bills out. And they did confirm that if a rate is passed next Tuesday, that we would be able to get that into the January billing. And then that would, if we go back to that last table on the 3rd page, we're projecting right now a $950,000 deficit for this fiscal year. It won't solve that deficit because we're halfway through the year, but it will go a long way to reduce that deficit.
Thank you. Relative to the charts that you ran through with the various options of eliminating the minimum, changing the minimum to 10,000, and there was one other. But of the scenarios that you ran through, is there one that you think is a fair distribution of the cost to the users than another?
So the last meeting we were talking about that, and with no minimum, you would essentially be paying for what you use. So there's a sense that that would be an equitable solution between all parties. However, there is infrastructure, there's pump stations, there's a treatment plant that has to exist, whether you use 100 gallons or 100,000 gallons. And everyone benefits from that infrastructure. And since it's not really dependent on how much consumption there is, when you have a minimum, that there's a more fair sharing of the cost associated with that infrastructure. For me, both of these would get the account to a place where it would be close to self-supporting, if not completely self-supporting. So on that end, I'm agnostic. I could go either way. I'd be happy with either one of those decisions. With the 10,000 gallon minimum, the rate increase is $1. We haven't had a rate increase in a long time. I think the last The last time there was a proposed rate increase was in 2013. And I think the rate increase at that time was 60 cents. So, we're 5 years since then, and it wasn't raised in 2013. It hasn't been raised since then. And we'd only be asking for an additional 40 cents above that.
So as a practical matter, the person, probably single living alone, that's at the minimum is paying $5, and in this scenario would be paying $64, and that's on a quarterly basis?
Correct. They would have the most impact, whereas if we looked at other residential or even commercial and industrial accounts, the commercial and industrial accounts would see less of an impact with a 10,000 gallon minimum and a $1 increase, because most of those commercial and industrials are discharging higher than the 10,000 gallon. And kind of what's happening is the residential accounts that would be paying the minimum would almost kind of be subsidizing the commercial.
So if you go pay as you go, then everybody's just paying for what they use.
Correct.
Counselor Lisi, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I do like the idea of having the 10,000 gallon minimum, just because I do think that there's a lot of infrastructure that we have to cover. But when I look at the impact that has on the bills, I was going to bring up the idea that the commercial is inverted in that situation in terms of the increases that they would experience, and then moving somebody from perhaps a $20 bill to a $250 bill in a year sounds really unmanageable. I understand that it's fewer than 300 accounts, but I think that for those 300 accounts, the impact is really astronomical. So I would be in favor at this point in time in moving forward on a no minimum 665 rate, and then perhaps in another year or two building in the 10,000 gallon minimum, so that there is a little bit of a staggering. Yeah. Do you have a sense of what the average residential gallon use is? If it's not 10,000, like what is it, generally speaking? Or you can just do some backwards math?
If you give me a minute or two.
While you're doing that math, I'll just echo some of the comments that Councilor McGiverin made, and I'm very much in favor of moving forward on a proposal to bring before the council for next Tuesday so that they can utilize the vote next Tuesday to set the rate for the next quarter's bills.
Counselor Sullivan, I'll just
So
let you.
my quick math is around 17,000 gallons
17,000? Oh, so,
per quarter.
and the 10,000 gallon minimum is also for the quarter?
Correct.
Yep. So it's not so far off from what the average resident is using.
No, what we found was about a third of the residents, if we did a 10,000 gallon minimum, a third of the accounts would be in that bucket. Some would be on the lower end, and some would be, a couple gallons away from 10,000 gallons on that end.
And then finally, just to be really clear, so we understand the impact, no minimum at 665 is going to generate the same $1.4 million in revenue that 10,000 gallon minimum and 640 rate would create?
Plus or minus $10,000, yeah.
Okay, so I'll be motioning after a bit more discussion that we move forward with the no minimum and 665 rate.
Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Councilor McGivern's sentiments also and remind everybody what we just heard last week from bond counsel. This right here alone, fixing the sewer deficit, that's 1/3 of the money coming out of the general fund right now, 1/3 of the money that we need for 2 new middle schools for Holyoke. And that's doing it without any kind of a tax override or any of the other stuff, ballot questions that we're talking about. The monies are there. We just have to start correcting the deficit as expressed to us by bond counsel and get our act together.
Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, a few years ago, the mayor proposed a $50 flat tax for the approximate 700 homes that are not impacted by the sewer fund. Now, they, just hypothetically, I mean, I don't see that in here now. So is that dead?
Yes.
So that's not being reiterated, correct?
Stormwater fee.
The stormwater fee
Stormwater fee.
or a stormwater utility is not currently being discussed.
Now that's, okay, now is stormwater part of this, the sewer fee?
So the sewer fee goes to pay for debt service of projects that the city has taken on. There's some administrative costs in the city, but the bulk of it goes to our service contract with Suez. And Suez's contract is to operate and manage both the sanitary sewer collection system and the stormwater system. So a portion of this does go to pay for operations and maintenance of the stormwater system outside of the sewer shed area. I was talking with Suez, trying to get an idea of what is the cost associated with that. And overall, the stormwater cost for Suez is around $400,000 per year. That includes street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, culvert cleaning throughout the city. So not just in the areas outside the sewer shed area, but also in the sewer area. So if we're just looking at the cost associated with Suez's contract outside of the sewer area, it's in the magnitude of $25,000 per year. And really it's street sweeping and catch basin cleaning as needed.
Okay, now that's,
And if the stormwater utility or the storm fee were to be brought back up, the thought would be that it would be a citywide, that it wouldn't be limited to just the people outside of the sewer area.
right, at the time, I thought that fee was ridiculous, and I still think it, because it was based on nothing but a fake number. But what I would like to get understanding is, so I think I heard you say that the street sweeping, the catch basin in the fruit bowl section of Holyoke is basically $25,000 a year. That's what you're ballparking?
It's not.
Okay, but and then I thought I heard you say the rest of the citywide is 400,000 a year.
In total, yes.
Right. Okay. So, but in my opinion, that whole 400,000 cost should be shared for everyone in the city. So there should be no home that's excluded, no property, because all the streets are, I mean, everyone in the city travels the streets. I mean, that's like saying, I mean, because I live in the Elmwood section, I should pay for Elmwood. What?
Talking about the cleaning?
So, yeah, Linda, I think what he said, the $400,000 he mentioned was for citywide for
Cleaning.
for culverts
I
and
just wanted
whatever.
to
Yeah,
clarify,
400,000 citywide. So I've got to. First of all, I'm not going to vote for 665. I'll tell you that right now. But I don't see a proposal in here to share that 400,000 cost citywide. Is that being considered?
No, that's not being considered.
So, okay,
Right
so,
now.
right, so,
That would be something completely different. That would be a stormwater utility.
so that's not factored in here? The 400,000, that's not part of this?
The 400,000 is part of this, but to break it out of the sewer rate, we would need to be talking something totally different, which would be a stormwater utility or the stormwater tax or a rain tax, which is not what we're talking right now. This is just a rate increase to.
No, I know what we're talking right now, but I'm just trying to make it clear that the 400,000 is a part of this number which we're
is.
discussing.
Yes.
And that there are approximately 700 homes in West Holyoke. I realize they don't have sewer. I get it. I get the septic. I get it. But what I'm saying is the 400,000 is for public ways, including out there, but in the Highlands and everywhere else in downtown, wherever they travel, and there's culverts. And that's a cost, in my opinion, that should be shared by every property owner, whether they live in this part of town or in the fruit bowl section or anywhere else. Now, that's just my opinion. So, and without factoring in that aspect to this, why should I be asked to vote for something where, again, that $400,000 is left to a fraction of the city? Now, wherever that fraction is. So out of the, you said there are, looks like 6,300 parcels, or 6,300 accounts, you said. There might be 700 accounts or 500 accounts in that part of the city that have the, air quotes, benefits of traveling any municipal way and having stormwater, they don't have to pay for that. But yet, those of us that are on this side of the mountain have to pay for it. And now you're asking me to vote on an increase where, it's just $100 here, $150 there. Well, assuming we get to a vote about a debt exclusion, it's, the bond council, it's just, another $257. So just add to the $150. I mean, at some point, it becomes unmanageable. I mean, and unreasonable. And this is an unfair situation the way it is. I realize that the many councils have talked about that over the course of budgets, that we have a situation here where we're forced to take it out of the general fund to pay for a sewer. Well, part of that is because this contract with Suez is a pretty expensive contract. And by the way, Mike, when does that contract terminate?
I believe there's 6 more years.
And what does the city of Holyoke pay them approximately annually? Is it over $6 million?
Correct.
Okay, so we're paying Suez annually $6 million to manage the stormwater and the sewer. Is that true?
That's correct.
And on top of that, they drive around city vehicles with the Suez symbol on the street sweepers. They still have the Suez symbol on. Is that true, Mike?
They're Suez vehicles now. They've purchased new street sweepers.
Oh, we don't have, the city of Holyoke doesn't have street sweepers anymore?
No.
Oh, okay, that's no. I didn't realize that. But so they're their own. Okay, they can have
Correct.
the Suez symbol then. Okay, well, it's just a tough one to swallow without that number factored in. I'm sorry I missed the last public hearing, but I had a personal matter. So I was, as a chair lady knows, I think that's the first meeting I've missed in 2 years. So I don't feel bad, but it was, they're all important. I get it, but okay. Well, it's. And why is it, Mike, that, so I have a series of scenarios in front of us here that are kind of skewed. So you've got your numbers. So I take it, well, why'd you do this? So you have 630, you go from 540 to 635 to 640 to 665. I don't see any.
The 635, 640, 665, that was all to show the council what different rates, the revenue that would be generated from different rates.
Right, okay, so these get us, in your opinion, on your calculations, I should say, these get the city of Holyoke to not this year, I understood what I heard what you say, but get us towards balancing the sewer
Sewer
fund's,
fund.
it's an enterprise fund, right? Is that
Correct, yeah.
Okay. It gets us to balancing that, and henceforth, in fiscal year '21, for example, or maybe fiscal year '20.
Fiscal year 20.
Fiscal year '20, that the general fund would no longer have to subsidize the sewer fund.
In theory, yes. And the reason I say in theory is because there are water consumption fluctuations. If everybody stopped flushing their toilet, we would still have the contract with Suez that we would have to maintain, but we wouldn't be generating revenue from consumption. So based on historical consumption, those two rates would balance the sewer account in fiscal year 20.
Thank you.
So, Mike, I just have a couple questions, and then I'll recognize you, Counselor Lisi. So you're indicating that if we go to the 165, it would raise $1.4 million, when that is the highest deficit we ever had, but more likely they run from 340. I mean, if we eliminate the lowest and eliminate the highest, we're between 595 and 938. So I guess I want to cover the deficit, but I'm not sure I really want to go to a $1.25 rate to generate a $500,000 surplus. So I'm looking at it a little differently than Counselor Bartley, because the people who can't avail themselves of the sewer system have been subsidizing the sewer system since before 2014 through their property taxes. So everybody's been paying for the sewer system. So there's nobody that's been getting a break of any sort under the scenario we currently exist. However, and I know it's a problem when we do these rate changes after long periods with none, and I get that. But if I'm just trying to do the math in my head, it seems like if we increase the rate by $1 and go to pay as you go, that gets us out of the deficit situation, not this fiscal year, but next fiscal year.
So I was basing our expenses off of our current debt servicing and what we owe Suez. There is a variable with the Suez contract every year, and it's based on flows and loads that go into the plant. Mm-hmm. So the higher the strength, the more gallons, the higher that additional cost. There's also an allowance included for sewer rehabilitation with our contract with Suez. And when we exceed that allowance, the city's on the hook to pay for that deficit at the end of the year. So those are the variable costs.
So are you anticipating that that will go up, because it looks like the costs had generally been going down except in 2018?
Well, 2018 was a high year in the deficit because in 2017 there was a large exceedance in the flows and loads. So we paid less in 2017, but then in 2018 we had to make up for the exceedance in the flows and loads, which is why there's that larger deficit.
What are you anticipating for 2019 and 2020 in that regard? Do you have a sense?
Yes. So for 2019, I'm estimating around 8.2 million is our expense, and in 2020, 8.7 million would be our expense. We're also getting to a point where we're going to need to do some capital projects for the long-term control plan. We have the Jackson Street CSO project, which we're under consent order to construct and complete by the end of calendar year 2020. We will have to start construction next calendar year. So those costs are factored into next fiscal year's budget as well.
Thank you. Counselor Lisi?
Thank you. So I want to just note that if we are operating a sewer fund, and the expense to operate that sewer fund is roughly $8 million and climbing, $400,000 for street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, and culvert cleaning is about 5% of the entire budget. I totally support having a universal citywide fee to cover that. So I would file that order with you, Councilor Bartley, because I do support that notion. But I think that at the end of the day, we have a lot of catching up to do. And while it costs $8 million to support the full operation of our sewer fund, we're operating at, I think Mike said on average $800,000 deficit. And then when you add in the capital improvement projects to address the CSOs, we really need to be in a position where we have that money, like cash on hand, to do the work that we are being obligated to do. Again, it is an unfunded mandate, and we have to develop those funds. So I think that the most equitable way to move forward is really, again, utilizing that scenario where there's no minimum and that we increase the rate to $6.65 and start getting ahead of the curve here and leave money in the general fund instead of having the general fund acting as a life support for the enterprise fund, the sewer enterprise fund. Thank you.
Thanks. Mike, overall, what condition would you say our sewer infrastructure is in?
I mean, I don't want to be alarmist, but it's not very good. We typically have sewer collapses on Essex Street every year where we have to do an emergency repair. And if we had preventative maintenance where we could do sewer rehabilitation before a collapse, then instead of a $50,000, $60,000 fix, it would be a $20,000 fix. We have there's some alleys where we have steel plates in the alley because the sewer is collapsed underneath it. This is in the Jackson Street area. It's going to get fixed with that project, but those plates have been there for years because we don't have the money to fix it. There are areas where the sewer infrastructure is great. There's places where we have plastic pipe that doesn't leak, which is good, and we have areas where there's old brick sewers that are crumbling. Another thing with sewer infrastructure is leakage. So we have old infrastructure that leaks, and this is groundwater that's leaking into the pipes. Groundwater is clean. It should be going to the river and not to the treatment plant where it costs us to treat. It shouldn't be going to a pump station to get pumped to a treatment plant, which is even more cost. So if we had a way of rehabilitating our infrastructure before there was the catastrophic collapse, in the long run, it would cut down on our O&M costs.
Yep. And just to add that, for anybody, I don't want to gross everybody out by bringing in a sewer pipe like I brought in a water pipe, but did we just have a failure up in the Highlands?
We did, and that was
Not stormwater, raw sewage into the Connecticut River.
across the train tracks into the Connecticut River.
Yep. So, in my opinion, I think we need every bit of the increase not only to correct the deficit, but so we can get about the business of doing a better job of maintaining the system we have. That's the point I'm trying to get at.
Council Bartley?
Mike, one thing I didn't ask, on the, and I'm not clear on, when there's a residential or home, during a real estate transaction, there's quite often a $5 minimum payment. Is that addressed in here, Mike? I'm just not clear on, so, I mean, if somebody doesn't hit the minimum amount of gallons, are we still keeping it at $5 minimum payment? Is that proposed in here, or did you address it and I'm not seeing it?
So one of the options would be to eliminate the minimum altogether. So there would not be a $5 minimum. They would be charged based on their actual consumption, whether it's 100 gallons or 10,000 gallons.
Okay, so that would be it. So any kind of a real estate closing, so when somebody gets the final reading from water, they'll call up your department, and then your department will calculate it based upon actual usage and
That's one of
any
the-
arrearage or whatever, but.
Correct. But even the $5 minimum, it's set at a rate of less than 2,566 gallons. And if you were to just get rid of the minimum, instead of a $5 payment, those people, it would actually be a $13 payment. It's a funky thing, because the $5 minimum is based on this 2,500 gallons, but the 2,500 gallons at our $5.40 rate is actually worth about $13.
Okay, so that's something that has to be fixed right away. So,
But I don't want to muddy the waters too much on.
well, no, I mean, I want to make sure we cover that base, whatever vote we take tonight, that I want to make sure we phrase it properly for Crystal and anybody else that's here, so we can, so anybody selling real property in Holyoke should understand that your sewer rate's going to be based on an actual number, not some flat made-up fee. So I want, so whatever vote we take, I want to make sure well, put it this way, I would want that to be, if we had to have a separate vote on that, because I want to make that abundantly clear as opposed to the sewer rate. So that would be if the committee would indulge me in that, but thank you.
Okay.
Can you just
Councilor
repeat
Lisi?
can you repeat what you're asking then? You want to be able to communicate that to people in real estate transactions, that there's no longer a $5 minimum?
Yeah, and I'm being very inartful in the wording. May I, Madam Chair? Sorry. Sorry about that. Through the chair. So, yes, as Mike said, there's a base number that I would say a pretty strong percentage of residential closings just pay the they'll pay water and sewer, the final numbers for water. Mm-hmm. So whatever the water is, $112, that's what you owe. Okay. Mm-hmm. But then when you get the reading, when the water department goes and reads the meters, that doesn't really come to much in the way of gallons for that purposes. So there's generally a $5 fee, and as the superintendent just said, that's not even the realistic number. The real number, even for the what is it, Mike?
2,500 gallons.
Okay, the 2,500 gallons, as Council Lisi said, the real number is $13 and whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So I would want to, no matter what we do tonight, I want to make sure that is corrected. So I would want my vote to not go to waste. I want that to be take corrective action on that score, and then take another vote on whatever rates we come up with. Can we do that, Mike?
You're right, because we basically kind of had this conversation at the last meeting, and that's why the no minimum is kind of like the outcome of saying, well, the $5 minimum isn't really generating any revenue, and it's not realistic, so let's just get rid of it altogether and set a real rate that will reflect the cost of operating the system and be equitable in terms of application. And so that's the no minimum options. And then there was get rid of the $5 minimum and create a 10,000 gallon minimum. to cover the infrastructure requirements that the system requires. And then we could bring the rate down if we have a higher minimum. But I think everybody's leaning, the way that the numbers shake out here, it seems that no minimum, pay your fair share, pay what you use. It's a user fee. It is definitely more appealing at this point in time.
But Councilor Bartley, what you might have seen in doing those final readings is the sewer bill is $5, but the water bill might be around $40. And that's because the water department has the 10,000 gallon as their minimum. So the reason we use 10,000 gallons as a minimum would be to kind of reflect what the water department does.
Right. Just an aside, can I, Madam Chair? Just aside to my friend Councilor McGiverin, I kind of liked it when the Board of Public Works had to deal with this stuff as opposed to the City Council. I wasn't here when you switched that one back to our lap, Joe.
I didn't vote in favor of that one.
Yeah, well, we're all good at filing
Somebody
orders here.
wants
aren't we?
that one.
I guess the buck has to stop somewhere. Thank you.
So there's,
So I just wanted to just bring up a little different point. So we've had some discussion about all for one, one for all relative to some of the expenses, which in essence is what we have been doing for probably 10 years.
Correct.
So I was wondering if any consideration had been given to one of the recommendations that our financial manager made, which was to eliminate it as an enterprise fund, since it is the only one that we have. And it sort of has the same kind of lifestyle, if you will, as a revolving fund, which one of our members really hates. And I just wondered if there was any consideration given to that, to just make it part of the general budget instead of doing this side.
So I haven't been part of any of those conversations. Right now, our focus has been on the rate,
Just
trying
to
to
deal
get
with what you
something.
have.
Correct.
And I don't know how involved of a process it would be, but as a practical matter, we have not been treating the enterprise fund as an enterprise fund for probably a decade. But,
I'd be interested in exploring that and having a conversation about that.
because every other department we fund. Counselor McGiverin?
Well, an enterprise fund means that the rate-generated sewer plant is connected to the city budget. You know, the water department is not an enterprise fund. They're not connected to our budget, and yet they're part of the city itself. An enterprise fund only wasn't voted on until somewhere in the, I believe, the 90s. And the sewer rate was always there, you know, since this plant was built in the 60s. One of the problems when the plant was built in the 60s, it wasn't built large enough to handle the combined sewer overflows. It handles the amount if there's no large storm. It handles the amount of sewer easily. But now the Berkshire project, which was about 45% of our problem, you know, we corrected that. Now, we still have projects that total about 55% of sewer overflows that we have to correct, or start facing $10,000 a day fines from the federal government. You know, these are things that we got to remember. You know, the numbers in front of us to correct the wrong and to stop the bleeding, both with the sewer plant, but also with the general budget. We heard from our financial advisor, who's been with us since 1973. This is one of the biggest things we can do to correct the deficit problem with the city budget itself. We recently heard from DOR, we have to stop deficit funding. When we put $800,000 on the backs of property owners for the sewer treatment plant, we are creating a deficit. We are doing something that is unfair, more unfair than Councilor Bartley's talking about the stormwater. You know, Chicopee did a stormwater rate, but I don't believe, I believe it goes into a separate account and does separate things, and it's pulled away from their sewage treatment plant and their sewage treatment operation. We have the opportunity to correct this and to go into the next decade of projects that we have to do on the right foot. And if it was a $500,000 surplus, to me is nothing in a $9 million budget. You know, what we can do is establish some rules that any surpluses could become part of a stabilization fund for future projects for the treatment plant And that would eliminate some of our future borrowing cost, which we all know a big part of what we're paying here for is interest. And the management fee is I think, sometimes been correctly mislabeled, because Suez, with that management fee, operates the plant, including all employees that the city used to pay for through the rate itself. And when we had that major up on North Pleasant Street, up in Smith River Terrace, that major break, Suez brought additional people in, additional help, that corrected that problem very quickly. I don't know if the city, with just the way we used to operate this plant, could have done that. And hopefully, because there are parameters and there are benchmarks that we hit before we start getting fined. And hopefully what they did will prevent us from being fined because they acted so quickly. The number's staring right at us. The number that's being proposed makes sense, I think, from all angles. No one wants it, but not doing anything is worse than doing something. We need to correct this and stop the bleeding.
Thank you. But I would just remind us that it's all the same people paying, whether it's a tax, a sewer rate, a fee. It's all the same people. It's just different pots of money. Counselor Lisi?
It's true, it is all the same people, but in terms of the amount of revenue coming in and the way it gets to get spent it begins to really limit what we can do with our general fund dollars and what we can do for the residents in terms of services, staff, and training. Anyhow, I'll make the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we've exhausted. Before, I just want to check in with the public to see if, given the discussion and the information that's come forth, is there anybody who wishes to speak on this matter of the sewer rate? Not seeing anybody? I just want to be sure.
Sure. So I'd like to motion that we set a rate of $6.65 with no minimum and recommend that to the full city council for Tuesday.
So we have a motion and a second. Are there any other motions?
No, I'll move on that one.
All right, well then we have a motion and a second to set the rate at $6.65 with eliminating the minimum rate, going hand in hand.
Yes, thank you for that.
Okay? So on that motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
And I have to be opposed to this too. I just think we're going too high all at once. I would accept something lower if we could amend it to, say, $1 on the rate, if there's any appetite for an amended rate of that sort.
Mike, where does that get us?
I'm estimating off the top it would get us to about $1 million. I just think we have to keep in mind between the CPA, the increase in values of property that's going to automatically increase the taxes on the property owners, both residential and business, that here we go again. And people are getting on an average maybe a 2% raise in their paycheck.
That would get us about
640 with no minimum.
So I would offer that as an amendment if there's a second. Hearing no second, then the motion before us is the 665. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
So then
We'll recommend,
perhaps,
and I'm going to be a no on it, so we can recommend it out to the council with, out a recommendation, since we haven't come to agreement on the recommendation, but we can still move it out to the council.
thank you.
Is everybody in favor of that, moving it to the council without recommendation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
So 3-1, it goes to the council without a recommendation because we were tied to, in favor to opposed on the 665. We'll have this debate on Tuesday.
Linda, have you closed the public hearing?
I need a motion on
Motion
that.
to close
Yes,
the public
thank you.
hearing.
Thank you. Second? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. So that takes care of 5 and 6. So 7 and 10. Item 7, ordered that a permanent reconfiguration of Sunset and/or Ashley Road or other streets in the neighborhood be considered once the temporary pilot project is completed. We had a very strong, favorable response to the pilot in the public hearing. And so I just put it on the agenda so we can keep the conversation going about the next steps, not expecting that you would have a lot of information. But I guess Bob did send an email I didn't read yet.
That was regarding Bemis.
Oh, that's on Bemis?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there hasn't been any real activity on Sunset and Ashley since our last meeting.
So what would be a reasonable time frame for us to table this to, from your point of view?
I would say January, the second meeting in January.
Okay, I'd accept a motion on that.
Continue it to,
Table, the public hearing is closed,
oh, okay, so.
right? So we're just
Just motion to table,
table to
or whenever you want to bring it up.
the second meeting in January.
Okay, that's a motion.
All in favor? Aye. And item 10, I'm sorry, yes, it was item 10, which is the residents' petition, and the order by Counselor McGee ordered that permanent speed humps be installed on Bemis Road. And so there was a notice issue, so now we're waiting for engineering to look at locations, so then we can notice it properly and do the public hearing. And I did take Mike out of order. He's been down here all day and all night, so giving him a break.
So the map that you have before you is Bemis. This is the results of a speed study that we did between November 16th and the 27th, 2018. Going down the hill, there's a bunch of red dots with the posted speed limit listed below it. So when you're going towards Northampton Street, the speed limit would start off at 20. Once you get around the bend and get into the straight section, the speed limit increases to 30. And then after 91, it decreases to 15 all the way to Northampton Street. When we did our speed study, we measured a speed limit of 35 miles per hour in the 30 mile per hour zone to the west of 91, and we measured an average speed of 33 miles per hour in the 15 mile per hour limit on the east side of 91. And in that, 85th percentile speed of 33 miles per hour going down the hill was similar. It was 31 miles per hour going up the hill in a 15 mile per hour speed limit. And on the west side of 91, the 85th percentile speed was 38 miles per hour in a 20 mile per hour speed limit area. So traffic calming is definitely warranted. Speed humps would be useful in doing so. When we're looking at Bemis, we do see that there could be a short circuit on Meadowview. I think it's Meadowview or Meadowbrook, where, let's say you're coming from Northampton Street and you come to the stop, you could take a right and continue on Bemis, but if you take a left, you could go on Meadowbrook and
That's what they'll do.
theoretically bypass speed humps that are on
What they'll
Bemis.
do, I can put
So,
$100 on it.
so our recommendation would be to put speed humps on Meadowbrook as well as Bemis. And looking at the geometry of Bemis, we're thinking about 3 speed humps on the west side of 91, and then 2 speed humps on Bemis on the east side of 91 before you get to that kind of jug handle bend, and then another 2 speed humps on Meadowbrook in the straightaway section.
Okay, so it sounds like we're close then to knowing the where, so then we could do the proper notice.
Correct.
Okay, so I guess once we know that from you, then Ryan will go ahead and
Yeah.
do the next steps.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for this update. That was very helpful. I hadn't had a chance to read it.
So just a motion.
Everybody else set
I'm
with
all
this?
Motion that we
Where do you
adopt?
want us to, should we keep it going and table it to the end of January, just to keep it in front of us?
Sure.
Okay.
And we could do the public hearing at that time.
If
Yeah.
we can get the ads in time.
Yeah.
So,
Public hearing now?
no,
Or not? Oh,
no,
Okay, so you just want a motion to table this to the second meeting in January?
right. And if they get the numbers in and Ryan can advertise in time, then it'll be a public hearing.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So is that a motion to table to the second meeting in January?
I think that's what you said, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks a lot, Mike. So back to regular order. Item 3. Can I have a motion on item 3?
Motion to take up item number 3,
And open the public hearing?
open the public hearing.
Yes, this is a continued public hearing. So we have a motion to open the public hearing, to continue the public hearing on the special permit application from Boston Bud Factory for a registered marijuana retail establishment and a registered marijuana manufacturing establishment at 73 Sargeant Street, Holyoke, Mass. Map 028, Block 07, Parcel 013. So if the applicant would like to come up to the microphone, at the last meeting, we had a communication from planning, and the applicant hadn't had an opportunity to answer planning. Today, I don't know if other members got this, I just got this.
Yeah.
Did members of the committee get a communication from Mr. Marrero?
I did, and I thought I saw him lingering in the hall.
Yeah, he was.
To be able to speak to it. Come on in.
Oh, great. Yes, we finally got to number 3. We had circuitous route. So we did receive your comments, but some of us haven't had an opportunity to read them, so I thought it might be helpful, and then we can get brought up to date on where we're at with any remaining open issues. Yes, Solurge is on the agenda also.
You want me to just speak?
Pardon?
You want me to speak now, or?
If you wish, that would
Okay.
be great.
Yeah, the comment letter is very similar to what you'd gotten before. We made a few updates and changes. We did get a photometric plan. It seems adequate by and large. There are just a couple of areas of concern where it shows 160-foot candles. I don't know if that's a typo or not, but that would signify a level of brightness that is, beyond the standard for a stadium. So maybe it's just a typo, but it does show it on a couple occasions. So it may be something that you want to ask the applicant. The traffic impact statement seems well done and very similar to what we see with other applications. I'm not sure if the city engineer has had the chance to view it. It seems like they submitted things to our office, but not necessarily through the official channels of the clerk's department until later on in the process. So I just literally don't know if the city engineer has seen it, because usually we defer on detailed traffic stuff to the city engineer. There was an issue discussed last time about the separation of tenants and uses in the building, that we weren't sure if the Holyoke Police Department had seen it and they were okay. We did touch base with Captain Moriarty, who's the lead at the police department on this. They did sign off and they're okay with that. We didn't get anything new on the trash management questions, so maybe that's something that they can address in the future. Parking, as we said, is just something to note that the council would have to approve any changes to parking, how parking is dealt with in that area, whether it's Sargeant or Ray Street. And I think that was noted last time. And then the last thing is, usually we get detail sheets on stuff like windows, bollards, planters, and the canopy, particularly the stuff that's on the public right-of-way, just to make sure that, how much they're encumbering in the right-of-way, whether they're going to be a problem or not, whether there's still enough space to pass. And so they have depicted it on the images, but we don't have dimensions on a detailed sheet. So that's something that we would usually receive. We don't, I don't believe we have an update on that. So that would be the only other thing that we still don't have.
Okay, great. And we haven't run into any buffer issues with any of the applicants at this time, right?
At this time, no.
Thank you. So whoever wishes to speak for the applicant, we're going to just need to have the remaining questions answered and submitted into the committee.
I believe the answers were in there.
So,
We addressed the waste issue, and we have McNamara Waste here with us tonight to answer any questions as well.
okay,
There's a letter from
so
McNamara in the packet that was submitted.
now are you referring to the original submission or a
new submission.
more recent submission?
The more recent submission.
Can you tell me the date of it just so I can see if I have it in my file?
The Monday? 10th, December 10th.
Okay.
And to the
We
chair,
sent an email previous to that, I'm sorry.
we're not a vetting body. We're an advising body. So we pose a question that we didn't see it, and so if they're
No,
able to
I'm-
address it to the satisfaction of the body, that's fine.
Right. No, I'm just looking.
We did make a choice. You had advised us to make a choice of whether we were going to pick it up and dispose of it ourselves or have McNamara come and do it. So we've arranged with McNamara to do on-site pickups.
Right, I'm just trying to make sure that I have everything in the record.
Sure.
That people have submitted, that's all. And so I just want to verify because I just don't.
Well, an email was sent a week and a half ago at least to when we responded originally, and that was copied to Ryan as well.
Right, and that's on what we're discussing right now.
Yeah.
Right, so in addition to that, relative to the question of the DPW engineer or any other communications, I just wanted to make sure I had the most recent one. Do you mind looking in here and seeing what you see as the most, because these are the original ones. Ryan, if you're watching this and you have a hard copy you can bring up here, that would be great.
I have a hard copy if somebody wants to make copies as well.
Okay.
So I have a copy of the entire submission with me.
That would be helpful. If you could just let us see it for now, we will give it back to you so that you don't. Lose it. So would it have come to us through Ryan or through some other office?
Sorry, we emailed Ryan a while back, but then we were also informed that we should resubmit. So then we made additional copies and resubmitted yesterday at the clerk's office. So we submitted another 10 copies in case everybody needed one.
Okay.
We also have a letter, copy of the application to HG&E that Nelson had asked us to include in the packet. So that's in there, also showing that they will add the lighting to the utility poles.
If you don't, here, would you mind? Thanks a lot. Okay, this looks like the original application, which we have.
And that has the updated traffic plan in it, as well as the letter from McNamara Waste and the HG&E application.
So Marcos, you had looked at the waste management plan originally?
I think our question was how, not who was going to pick it up, but how is the alley wide enough? There seemed to be a 90-degree turn if a truck had to go in to where the essentially to tip onto the truck. So we weren't clear if that was going to be pulled out to Sargeant Street. Was a truck going to be able to make
Okay.
the curb? So it was kind of like describing the logistics of it,
Okay.
as how the site was going to work as far as trash.
So it would be helpful if you have your company here for them to speak to it, but we would also.
Speak to that, because by the time it goes out to McNamara, it's been rendered unusable, so it's just basic hazard, it's non-hazardous solid waste at that point. So there's no special handling procedures once it's been rendered unusable in accordance with our security plan.
Right, so the only thing we would need is the documentation of the where and the how and the who.
And that's in our
Correct.
general security plan, which was approved by the chief of police.
Okay, so, did you want, Counselor
Yeah,
Lisi?
I'll take a stab. So from what I understand, we're looking for the company that's doing the waste hauling to essentially document that they feel that they could get their vehicles in there to access the dumpster.
This is the owner of McNamara Waste.
Oh, great. Great.
Steve McNamara, McNamara Waste Services. The location is sufficient to what truck would be specialized to pick up the waste at that location.
So and you've seen it and you feel that they can make that 9-degree turn?
Yes.
And is it a different type of truck than what a normal hauler would look like?
Yes, we're going to do it in a specialized container delivery truck, and then we're going to haul it off to be recompacted and then brought to the Millbury burning plant in Millbury, Massachusetts for this final burning disposal.
Great. And can you it's a compact waste hauler truck, or how did you describe the truck?
We're going to put it into a waste hauler truck and recompact it with other waste so they can be burnt all together.
So I have located the letter
Thank you.
from the McNamara Company. Can you just show this to Marcos and see if that's what he would need, or if he got it or didn't get it? I'm not sure what the paper flow is at the moment.
And just in general, without having, so you don't have to wait for me to read this whole thing. If what he's saying satisfies the committee, I think that's fine. The general question that we ask is because we don't know if someone's going to be hauling out waste into the right of way, and then it's going to be sitting there for a long time. So we ask the question for
Okay.
for rigor.
All
So
right, I was
if
just-
they're on the
no,
record
but I was
saying,
just trying
yes,
to-
so there will be a truck going in and they'll be hauling it out, and so it'll be secure and on site. So generally, if someone makes that statement, then we're fine. We just didn't know if that was going to be the case or
Oh,
not.
all right.
Okay.
Okay, good enough. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. So it appears we have the answer to that. So if you could answer the question on the lighting?
We'd have to consult with the engineer. We're not going to put any stadium lighting up. The only existing,
Well, like he said, maybe it's a typo, or I don't know.
well, and we'll have to, you're familiar with Sage Engineering, so you've worked with them. So they're the ones that did our plans for us. If there is a typo, I'm sure they can adjust it pretty easily, but they had recommended that we add 2 lights near each entrance, 2 lights in the rear and 2 lights in the front for additional lighting, and then the canopy has LED lighting under it, but there will be no stadium lighting or anything that will be seen from satellites.
Counselor Bartley?
Yeah, thanks, gentlemen, for coming back again. Okay, so I appreciate your willingness to invest in Holyoke. Okay, but this question was raised to me, so I'm gonna raise it to Marcos. Marcos, so for RMDs, and I know it's an RMD. There certainly is a requirement from the Commonwealth relative to buffer zones. I think it's 500 feet from anywhere from where children congregate.
The updated legislation is 500 feet from a certified school. So that was the language of where children congregate. First appeared in the regulations from the Department of Public Health, but that has since changed because of the arbitrary nature of where children congregate, because that could be anything. So that was further clarified to be schools. So
Just
so that would be
schools?
like Morgan School, Kelly School.
Okay, but not a church or anything like that?
No.
So there's nothing, because that was considered to be, that was in there, but that's been removed from the,
Yes,
Or
precisely because it would be arbitrary, right? It could be a candy store, right? Like it could be any. anyone can argue that there are children at their site, and so they congregate. So that was removed from the,
Okay,
from the
so
law.
this property address, I think is within 500 feet of a park, but you're saying that that would not apply?
That does not apply. No,
Does
it's
not
it's
apply to
now
this
schools.
applicant. It's schools. So, and there might be a church proximate to this property address on Main Street, and you're saying that that would,
Unless it's a registered school with a Commonwealth, it does not apply.
a registered school, the Commonwealth. All right, and you can, at some point, forward that
Sure,
to me, so
absolutely.
I can
Yep.
have that.
Yep.
And I couldn't find it myself, so that would be very helpful. So I can at least understand the buffer zone. The buffer, because if this comes up again, I just want to make sure I can point to it.
So do you have a letter from the engineer relative to traffic impact at the site?
I do not have one directly from the engineer, no. All of this was submitted with everything else, so I would assume he has a copy, but again, we reiterate, we don't believe that end of Sargeant Street and Ray Street will have any traffic issues. Gateway, Ray Street supports Gateway City Arts and events and everything on the other end. We're a small 500 square foot retail space. We aren't going to be drawing the crowds that Gateway has. We don't believe there's any parking or traffic issues.
Well, I don't know. I think some people are taking some cues from the little retail space in Northampton.
Well, that's not a little, that's not a little space. That's a full commercial space.
But I mean, in the scheme of things, a lot of traffic.
Yes, they've gotten some
In
bad
and
press,
out.
but also don't forget that Netted has done a great job in Northampton. So it's all in the planning and preparation, and we're here before you every time answering every question.
Well, right,
you
and
have,
that's the kind of thing that we're driving at.
Right. We've had conversations with other business owners as well as trying to temper the openings so that we're not flooding certain areas and trying to time things. So there's a lot of collaboration and cooperation in between other shops that are coming into Holyoke as well.
So if, Councilman.
So where are you with the Cannabis Control Commission?
We've received a second round of questions from them, so we are 2 of the 13 applicants in Hampden County at this point. Our background checks and fingerprinting has been done. We're hoping that we will have an application deemed complete by the end of the year, and that starts a 90-day period until you get preliminary approval.
And then what happens?
Then you can start construction and be ready for a final inspection and opening.
So then your timeline is,
6 months, or probably 4 to 6 months at least.
yep.
So I just have a question if the committee, I would like to ask legal. Under public hearing, do I need a suspension?
Well,
Okay. So, Crystal, relative to reaching out to the various departments, I know that the clerk's office sent it out to all the various departments. Do we need to have a letter on file from the engineer relative to the traffic, separate from planning review? As, to make sure we're following all the procedures under the ordinance?
I mean, I don't know specifically if you need a letter in the file. I think you should have a full application in front of you before making any decisions. So if,
But he didn't provide a letter in the first application as well, so we believe we've covered all of that in our narrative.
Right. This was just relative to a comment that we weren't sure at this point if the city engineer had seen the traffic impact documents, but you're saying that,
The questions came from planning as to not having the supporting documentation, so the original question was raised by planning, and that's what we added, the ITEW tables and all of the supporting documentation.
Right.
So I believe Marco said that seemed adequate.
well, right, so I guess the question at this point is, has that information gone to the engineer, right?
Yes, he has it as far as I can tell as of yesterday. So, to further clarify my comment, it's not that I think you need a letter from him to make a decision. It's just that I want to make sure you understand that we're very deferential to the city engineer who understands the engineering calculations around these submittals.
Okay.
So whereas the first time around, we did not have the calculations and the IT numbers, now we do. We have a full analysis, but I couldn't tell you that it is pristine and accurate, right? Like the city engineer would be able to tell us, even, as staff, it's like, yes, this all checks out. So I just want to make sure that I'm making the right representation to you when I say it looks good to us, but the city engineer
Okay.
hasn't seen it.
But the city engineer does have it.
As far as I understand, as of yesterday.
Okay, all right. Counselor Lisa, did you want to be recognized?
No, it's fine.
Oh, okay. Are there any, okay, so the other thing that we haven't seen are the detail sheets relative to windows, finish, and things like that.
Which is all existing and goes back to the planters, which the city is giving us to put on the streets. And the only thing going on the sidewalk is the planters, which you guys are giving us and we're agreeing to maintain.
And so are you going to roll that into the application as part of,
We've
that.
contracted with Sage Engineering, and they'll be doing final drawings and plans as well, so we'll have all of the engineering drawings. This is just a site use permit that we're looking for now. So once we get to building permits and all of the other things, we will have complete and final drawings.
so what is the will of the committee? I mean, I think we have certain questions we need to have answered relative to the use, but then we're getting into deeper details around details of planters and the like. But once we approve this special permit with whatever conditions we would put on it,
Are you
that
asking
it'll
me?
be done.
I mean, I would just assume have a vote on it with the regular conditions we put on every single one. Just our, I think Crystal said we have to list them. I can't remember what they are, but they're in every other.
We included all of those in our narrative, so
I think, I know you did, yeah, I know you did, but I just. we're just
Hang
gonna-
on, I have
pretty-
them.
They're pretty standard.
Yes, and we adopted every one.
Well, not standard, but it's standard for us.
We thought they were fair, so we agreed to all of
We
them.
try to be fair.
Well, I just,
And we're here, you know, if there are questions, we've come back for everything and worked through everything. So
You don't have a
we're-
choice.
We're here for the long haul.
I would say you don't have a choice. You have to come back, so.
There's always a choice. Well, we've tried to do this the right way from the
Well, if
beginning.
you want the permit, you don't have a choice.
do you wish to be heard under the public hearing for a comment relative to the application? Now would be the time.
John Hazen Paper. Hazen's been in Holyoke since 1925. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
And, you know, we live and die by the intersection of 391 and Main Street, and it's a tractor-trailer world. Guys, come on up here, because you may have input. I want you to...
Okay, the one that we're on now.
I understand,
Oh,
but
okay,
I would
is
think,
Sargeant
I
Street.
would
Okay.
think that access to Ray Street and Sargent is again going to be 391 and Main.
Or 391 commercial.
391 commercial, true, right. And so, you know, Hazen and Sunoco and other companies have a lot of truck traffic through that intersection. That's a very busy intersection, especially during peak times. A lot of traffic violations. I hear every day about cars running red lights. Frequently, there's gridlock there, meaning that cars are in the middle of the intersection with, you know, red lights, and things get snarled up. I get complaints frequently from truckers and employees about backup at that intersection. And it does look like that will be the, you know, the major access point to the city for all of these retail cannabis operations. And so we're very concerned because, you know, we live and die by that truck access and also by being able to get our employees in and out safely.
So relative to this application on Sargent Street, is there something that you would see that they could mitigate relative to the parking? I'm a little unclear as to,
Well,
on that
we're a
side.
little unclear too, but we see the risk, and you know there has been a lot of news about Northampton and Leicester, and they're different setups in Holyoke. You know, I acknowledge. Downtown Northampton does not have a lot of tractor trailers. Downtown Holyoke has a lot of tractor trailers 24/7, and that's a big difference. According to the Cannabis Control Commission, in the first 5 days of operation, Leicester and Northampton together had over 16,500 visits, which, is great business, but it's a real concern in terms of handling the traffic. And, lots of stories about long lines of pedestrians or people waiting in line for hours and hours. And it's just hard to imagine that in around Main Street in Holyoke.
So in that case, even though this would be, if I'm having my spatial orientation correct.
No, you're right. This is
on the other side of Main.
yes, that's true. It's just that I think the applicant even said that 391 to commercial, 391 to Main Street is going to be a big access point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 391 to commercial.
Be an access point. We'll be one of the smaller ones. We'll be relying on more neighborhood traffic than the guys that have more marketing and advertising and are drawing from outside of the area.
Right.
We plan on being a mom and pop, smaller foot traffic, local area.
And maybe you could remind us after how much parking you have there and how you see that working. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. If you could give
you're exactly
your name and address.
I'm Larry Hogue. I work for Hazen Paper Company as well. I'm a resident of Agawam. In full disclosure, a member of the ZBA there. To this gentleman's point, though, I think in all fairness, you should see the traffic impact study before you move forward on anything, because you have lanes of access that come off the highway that directly affect that, whether it's to the left of the 291 exit 5, or to the right. And you may need to have extra traffic signaling, extra signage. To this gentleman's point, honestly, you may need signage pointing the direction for potential customers. But it's really a matter of public safety, and I'm sure they appreciate that as well. You may have to label the street parking for maximum amount of parking time, where you're not having people loitering for 2 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours in the same parking spot, and having people circling around because there are no parking spaces. You may have to have overflow parking like they've done in Lowell. Now there they've got parking spaces for 170 vehicles and had to resort to overflow parking. It's a serious increase in vehicular and pedestrian traffic. And quite frankly, you really have to probably do a first-hand look at the area to see what effect this will have at those large volumes of customers coming into a very finite zone.
So would it be fair to say then that if there was, say, an unanticipated
Latest application.
high traffic backup development that is unanticipated, we could potentially, as part of a special permit in that area, stipulate something that if the traffic to the site is exceeding the capacity of the road and the intersections are blocked, that the applicant would provide traffic patrol.
Yes,
I saw,
yes.
at least in the example of the East Hampton one that will be opening soon, that is part of their plan.
Yes, that's very appropriate.
Councilor Lisi?
Thank you. I just wanted to note that while the applicant has provided the official numbers for what type of traffic they may generate, I think that the engineer would be able to interpret whether those numbers would have an impact on the flow. And so I think it would be advisable to perhaps just continue the public hearing one last time so we could get a hold of that report, because one of the things that we may have to do is create a condition that some sort of traffic improvements are made if the engineer deems there is going to be some sort of significant detrimental impact.
Right, but within the special permit itself, I think in sort of like that company in East Hampton is anticipating, they're gonna have the traffic control as part of their business model.
But traffic control on site and moving the cars along and in and out of the spots, I think is going to be different than the.
Oh, right. No, I'm not. I'm just saying and. I'm not.
Good.
I'm not saying.
And is great. I just think it's advisable to see what kind of impact those numbers have on the infrastructure that we have, and waiting for the engineer's report is advisable.
Right.
Charlie Sheehan from Hayes and Paper, just one comment. We're concerned also about the aggregate traffic that's going to be brought into the area by the number of distribution points in that local area. So we have Solurge, East Coast, and then this group here in a really small
They're all within, what,
area,
quarter
all
of
off
a
of
mile?
391 between our main plant and our west plant. And that traffic, particularly in the first few months of operation, are going to have a big impact on our ability to serve our customers.
Right, because you have to be able to get the trucks in and out.
Right. And our employees back and forth.
And there are a number of other businesses there, like US Sabaki and Marcus Printing, Sunoco, a lot of tractor-trailer traffic.
That's big down there.
You know, and there may not be an issue, but I think the engineer's report will tell us whether
Yes.
or not there's going to be an issue.
Yes, yes,
But
yes.
we'd be more than happy to agree to terms on that, that if there is overflow, we'd be more than happy to accommodate off-site parking and shuttling people in. There are ways around this. I'd rather not delay us. We've already had other delays when we missed a meeting. So I hate having to go through this again when we're more than willing to agree to dealing with whatever it happens. I mean, Holyoke has welcomed cannabis as an industry, and we've got to hope that the businesses coming in are going to support Holyoke as well. So I think that other businesses are willing to say that same thing, that, we're all working together to try and bring an income into the city. We shouldn't be overly restrictive on us either.
But can I just make a point?
Councilor Lisi?
Thank you. So, but you understand what I'm saying? So one thing is managing the traffic flow in and around the area with the parking. And we could put that as a condition regardless. But if the engineer comes back with a report that says the official traffic numbers that you have documented for this type of business are going to inflect the arteries that access into the city, then we can actually create conditions that ask you to do some traffic mitigation or improvements at these intersections.
I absolutely understand that, but the other companies have already put in traffic plans as well. So the engineer's seen plenty of traffic plans, and not one question has come from the engineer on any traffic plans. So I think this is more of how the businesses work together to support each other. We're just another business working in Holyoke. There's got to be some give and take.
Speak through the chair,
Oh, I'm
please.
sorry. There should be some collaboration as to how we work together. We're trying to bring more business in and support Holyoke. I think that would be good for other businesses as well, as long as it's done properly.
Well, and exactly, and that is exactly what we're working to get to, because the business needs of retail are very different from the business needs of industrial general. And so part of our job in issuing the special permit is to make sure we don't create a win-lose and that we create a win-win. The only other way I could see around waiting for another 2 weeks would be if you stipulated that as a condition of the special permit, you would follow any recommendations that come from the engineer of the Department of Public Works following their review. If you stipulate to that, I mean, that's what we would stipulate once he gives it to us. So,
I believe that's a reasonable
you can
request,
think
and
about
we would
that.
defer to the engineer anyway.
Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you. I'd urge the committee to move forward. These issues can be addressed either through the special conditions or, through site plan review. And this was all due respect to Hazing and Sonico and the rest. Think back a couple of years ago. Main Street. We had dozens of businesses on Main Street. They're all closed now. They're gone. We've had 23 paper mills close in Holyoke. Holyoke Machine is gone. Worthington Pump is gone. National Blank Book is gone. Kodak, Advanced Offset Plate, Chase and Coolidge, Holyoke Valve and Hydrant. You want me to keep going? And now we're having one business come in, and it's going to adversely affect traffic downtown. What if those businesses were all still there? We'd be working around it. Traffic's a good thing. And it's a problem we can work around and something we can address later. This is an industrial section of town. Yeah, we're going to have traffic. I hope we have a lot more of it, and we'll address the issue and take care of it.
Okay, so,
Madam Chairman, if I could speak in, number one Point of order. This gentleman, we don't know who he is. He's been speaking, but we don't know who he is.
Oh, if you could just identify yourself again. He did initially at the
Frank
beginning.
Daly, Boston Bud Factory.
Okay, thank you. So to answer the councilman's question, though, it is an industrial section. It is not a retail section. And yes, at one time, there were a lot of retail stores further down on Main Street. We all acknowledge that. However, closing a blind eye to the sheer volume that these facilities that have opened already are generating, you're not talking 5,000 extra vehicles in an industrial. You're talking upwards of 16 to 20,000 vehicles per day. And those are in limited times. As I understand from your opening, it's 8 to 8. So I beg the council to wait for the traffic study, make your own opinion and not defer it, and please take a look for yourselves at the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lisi?
I do want to make one other comment. So I live at the northernmost part of Holyoke, and I find my way over to Amherst, traveling through that part of Northampton where Netta is. And since they've opened up, there have been some congestion issues around rush hour. But I wouldn't ever say that I felt like I was stuck in traffic. And I think that to Northampton's credit, and I don't know if Netta has this as part of their conditions for opening up to manage the traffic flow in and around there, and hiring the police to help manage the traffic flow. There has been some congestion, but I never felt that I was actually sitting in traffic, and I do think that it's happening only early in the morning around 8 o'clock, and when I'm coming back around 3 o'clock, I'm not typically hitting any traffic. But I have heard other news reports that the traffic around rush hour, 5 o'clock, has been a greater volume.
Yes. And please keep in mind that there's only 2 stores open in the state. So we expect a decrease in Northampton once INSA opens in East Hampton as well, which should be within the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to see, as more and more of these shops open up, you're going to see a decrease in those flows and traffic. I don't believe by the time Holyoke gets around to opening, because we're 4 to 6 months away, by the time we get around, there are going to be a lot of other shops open. This is going to dissipate, and all of the owners are here willing to work with other businesses, and whatever we need to do, we're trying to support Holyoke. So, I think you've got to give us a little bit of the benefit of the doubt that we've worked with you every step of the way.
Thank you. I'm happy to have it passed this evening and adopted with the conditions that you put on, that any traffic mitigations or recommendations that the engineer suggests be adhered to, and also on-site traffic management.
Madam Chairman, can I say one last thing? And then that'll be the end. We're certainly sympathetic to other investors coming to Holyoke, and in general terms, we welcome that. Our focus, is solely on what we see as a storm coming on 391 in Main Street. Hazen Paper has invested a lot in Holyoke. We have 190 employees, 25% of whom are Holyoke residents. These are full-time jobs, full benefits. In 2009, when the world, really was going into meltdown, we were starting at that plant over on 17 Main Street. And today, that's the plant that produces the Super Bowl, holographic cover for the big show, which, I know everybody in Holyoke takes a great deal of pride in. So, we welcome new investors, and it's clear to me that these guys, are doing the homework that you have to do. It's not easy to get a business off the ground. And, we know that because it was tough getting a business off the ground right at the start of the Great Recession. It's a long, hard 10 years, in all honesty. And we continue to hire. We continue to develop new products. It's an exciting time. Holyoke Machine was an important supplier to us. They have been in town since 1840. The reality is that in the business world, there's always old businesses always dying, and new business is coming up. Within our own business, we're able to do that. Old product lines die, new product lines come up, And that was the reason we invested in holography. But, we really do implore you to carefully look at this traffic impact. Downtown Northampton's a great town. It's healthy, busy, but it does not have the tractor trailers that we have here. And you really got to look at that, because that's what makes the commerce flow here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make one
Councilor
more point?
Lisi?
Sorry. I just want to make one more point, because as counselors and representatives, we're really like lay people at the end of the day. We're citizens just like you and others. So any conditions that we create are really coming from the technical expertise of the staff that we have in City Hall. So I think that if we make conditions that the applicant apply with any recommendations and requirements that the city engineer would make would be the same, it would be one and the same as what we would make at a following meeting. So I think that you get the effect of having that protection based on a technical review by our city engineer that we can't provide, and so we will just be mimicking the recommendations that the engineer makes at some later meeting. So I think that we're providing the same coverage and the same protections by creating that condition that the applicant adhere to any recommendations and changes that the engineer requires to make the traffic flow.
And just by way of reference, in one of the last recent special permits that we recommended to the council, we had stipulated that the business shall be in compliance with the communication from the city engineer, Robert Parent, with a date certain. So what we can stipulate tonight is the same thing. And it's not going to change what his recommendation would be, whether we get it tomorrow or if we get it in 2 weeks. And so it would be as binding as if we were looking at it right now, if he issues it tomorrow. I almost think, as importantly, if we put in conditions that speak to that the applicant would hire a traffic patrol should the traffic backup and impediment on the intersection occur, so that traffic cannot move and people cannot get to work, that would be on the people that are bringing in the traffic as a condition. I think that would be found.
If there are that many cars, we'd be more than happy to pay for it.
And so I'm guessing then you'd be more than happy to shuttle them in from some off-site parking also.
If there are
So
that many,
we can
absolutely.
put that as a condition, should that develop. I mean,
think
who knows? You may become the most popular pot shop in Western Mass, you know? You never know. So, I mean, our goal is not to be punitive toward anybody who wants to come in and do business. We want business. On the other hand, we have to try to think of the worst-case scenario and not punish the people that have come and stayed through the trials and tribulations of the city either. So,
Encourage Hayes and Paper because of what they do. There's going to be a
Well-
lot of opportunity for them in packaging products. So there's a big market that you may want to investigate as well.
Holographic packaging.
I just want to make sure that you don't miss a huge opportunity.
okay, so what I'd like to do is read into the record the conditions, and I'm not saying you didn't put them in your paper, but I just want to put what we have done. That the owner of the building will always pay commercial property tax rate to the extent allowed by federal, state, and local laws for the duration of the special permit. That the business retain a minimum of 30% Holyoke residents for non-security jobs. That the hiring preference be given to security personnel that are retired Holyoke police or a retired member of another police department that now live in the city of Holyoke. That there be no marijuana consumption allowed on site. That there be no deliveries of recreational or medical marijuana from the site to individual homes, residences, or people. That the hours of operation be 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Sunday. And in addition, that the DPW recommendation made by the engineer for any traffic mitigation will be that the business will be in compliance with any traffic mitigation recommended by the city engineer. Saying it a little more smoothly. That the applicant will provide traffic patrol should customer traffic result in
Around the site.
well, that impedes the flow of traffic.
Well, Madam
In
Chair, you
the-
could say as recommended by HPD. You just saw the
In
traffic
the
focus,
neighborhood.
yeah, you want to have HPD.
To ensure traffic flow, should it be needed. And that off-site parking with a shuttle would be provided if inadequate for the volume.
We agree to all of those terms.
Is there anything else any member of the committee feels we need to add? Counselor Barton?
No, I don't want to add anything. I just want to, again, thank Mr., no, it's Mr. Daly, your partner.
Mr. Sarno.
Mr. Sarno, sorry, I know who you are anyhow, so I forgot, sorry about that, Mr. Sarno, thank you, but I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Mr. Hazen and Hazen Paper for all that they've done for the city of Holyoke for almost 100 years. I think that, I just want to make it clear, I've said it before, but Mr. Hazen's never been here for this part, but the reason we put it in the, we understand, Mr. Hoag, that's in an IG zone, we understand that. We did it for a reason. And the reason is that those section of Holyoke with the IG zone, I got a lot of, believe me, I got hate email on this. But the reason we did it and we advocated for it and ultimately we passed it is because of that section of Holyoke, despite your noble efforts for decades, we understand that, has just been a deteriorating condition. And we just need investment in that neighborhood, Mr. Hoag. Yeah, they'd all love to be in West Holyoke somewhere on County Road. I bet they'd love to be out there and have farms and all the rest of it farmland. I bet they would love that. It would be great. But that's what this body felt we don't need. We've got a nice rural neighborhood way out in West Holyoke. Want to keep it that way to the extent possible. And other sections of Holyoke were residential or commercial. But the IG zones, we felt, I mean, thank you for all you do. I mean, Mr. Hazen, thank you for all you do. We're not going to deny that, but I mean, there just hasn't been enough of Hazen Papers, as Councilor Sullivan indicated. There's just been so many legendary businesses leaving Holyoke. So, but I want to, if I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you, and I know if I can speak for the body and for everything you've done for Holyoke for all the decades, you know, we don't deny that. We cherish it, and it's a source of pride, as you indicated, along with the lottery tickets, and we won't forget that either. So. So I just want to appreciate that, but for right now, in my opinion, I think we should close this public hearing. I think we should move this on.
But before we do, I want to give an opportunity, one last round, since there's board information that has been shared. If anybody wishes to address us further on any of the points that have been made, or if you have any things you wish the committee to consider relative to the conditions.
No, through the chair to the council. No, we are not in objection to it being in an industrial area. We are just concerned that we look at all public safety issues and address them and put it on the record ahead of time so that we can all enjoy having a new retail tenant in the area. We just want to be safe and careful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our goal in crafting these conditions has been to accomplish that. So if there's anything we missed.
I just want to address that because we heard last night in the Finance Committee that the HPD is going to have a major grant starting with and really enforcing ordinances and major traffic intersections throughout the city of Holyoke from when we pass it next Tuesday. You know, Chairman McGiverin ran a great meeting, as he always does, last night, and we had, so starting next Tuesday through September. And so we're just going to, I mean, so now I'm not saying we're going to be a little, you know, crazy Sal Hadley with that kind of wackadoodle police force, but we're going to be more on point enforcing city ordinances with traffic violations and city ordinances with relative to speed limits and running lights and all that sort. So I think you'll see a lot more enforcement relative to that aspect. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no further need for comments or interest indicated from the public, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
A motion to grant a special permit with the aforesaid conditions. And did we
Second.
address the candle, the candle thing, whatever that was that Ms. Merle mentioned? The lighting?
Well, there was an assurance
Follow up with the engineer and address
given
it.
that
Has to be
it
done.
would not be stadium floodlights.
We'll ensure.
Well, I don't want to leave it loose like that. So what is it that you're going to do?
We only have 2 lights on either side by the entrances, so that would obviously have to be a typo if there's something out of whack that much, because there's nothing that would be that bright. There's,
Okay, so my condition would be that we would get a communication from Mr. Morero that matter's been mitigated to extent that
Okay,
satisfies
then
him.
we just fix that aspect of the plan.
The
Okay.
photometric plan.
I'm sorry?
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that we, that we have an updated photometric plan that reflects the reality of the situation.
All right.
Reducing the 160-foot candles. Would that be the way to say it, Marcos? Properly?
Yes, it should probably be much lower than 100.
Below 100?
Much lower, like it's probably at a level of 40 or under. I mean,
Oh,
probably,
okay,
you probably
so-
get a sunburn at 90.
I think we should just say corrected photometric plan.
Yes, I think that's
Yeah, and Marcos can send us a communication on that before next Tuesday.
corrected photometric plan.
So I'll make that motion.
I'll
Add that to
second it.
conditions.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we've added I believe that's number 11, but it's an added condition. Okay, so on the motion, we have the conditions with the new one that we just added. All in favor of granting the special permit? Aye. Any opposed? So this recommendation will go to the next city council meeting pending the receipt from Marcos, pending the receipt from the city engineer.
okay,
So we will need to have those before Tuesday.
okay.
Okay?
We hope to have them with
And
tomorrow or by the end of the week.
Thanks, everyone, for coming down and speaking to this. I think it makes a better result.
Motion may take item number 4 up. Is this a public hearing, Madam Chair?
Just grab my copies back if I could.
Oh, yes.
Do you mind, Rebecca?
Motion, are we just public hearing, Madam Chair? Number 4?
Yes.
A motion to,
It's a continued
Motion
public
to-
hearing.
motion to continue the public hearing, take up item 4 off the table.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item 4 is a special permit application from Solurge Inc. to operate an MME, MMD, RMRE, and RMCE and delivery service at 650 Beaulieu Street, map 055, block 00, parcel 001. So at our last meeting, we had discussion about a number of things. We have communication from planning with all questions asked and answered relative to a special permit for MME, MMD, and RMRE. Those are the special permits that we can issue under our ordinances. We do not have an ordinance that speaks to RMCE, and we do not, at this time, issue special permits for delivery. So I just want to clarify that, and in the notes that we've had back from planning, the 3 categories are the categories you have spoken to, correct?
The city ordinances allow special permits for all uses. It's up to you as a special permit granting authority whether you want to provide it or not. But the ordinance does allow for,
We don't even have language in our ordinance on RMCE.
I'm sorry,
Unless you
what
can
is the word,
show
what
me.
is the alphabet to, what is RMCE?
I'm assuming it's consumption, I don't know,
No.
No, we don't have,
but we don't have that in our ordinance.
well, the state doesn't have it, but we have everything right now in our ordinances as far as I remember.
Well, it may just be a matter of semantics, but in your communication to us,
Yes.
You have spoken to MME, MMD, RMRE, which is in our ordinances.
Oh, is this something? What is this? Oh, this is an agenda. The consumption on site. Yeah, and this is not, okay. Maybe I'm sorry, maybe I just missed what the point was.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we can't grant a special permit for that because we don't have an ordinance to grant a special permit under.
For
that.
consumption?
Right.
Right, well, they're not seeking one for consumption on
Well,
site.
I'm just,
Yeah. Okay,
I'm
all right,
clear,
okay, all right, no,
So-
we're on the same page.
So, that's what I'm clarifying, because the order that we just took up states, it states the three that you have addressed back to us, and in addition, it talks about RMCE and delivery, in that is what the special permit is being sought for. So I just, on the public record, want to clarify that what we're talking about are the first three. The MME, the MMD, and the RMRE.
So the only thing that I would clarify from that is that there's nothing in the ordinance that would prohibit delivery specifically. So it's up to the council whether you want to grant delivery or not. This applicant is seeking to be able to deliver. So you would have
As
to.
did one other. Mhm.
So you would have to look at whether they have in their site plan and preparedness the ability to meet the safety concerns and well-being concerns of the council.
Correct. But as we discussed in the past public hearing, we've been consistent with our conditions. I mean, some have to be unique to the applicant because their circumstances are different from another applicant. But beyond that, our standard restrictions that we have been putting as conditions are no individual deliveries. And to my knowledge, none of the security plans with the police department have entertained the possibility of individual deliveries because we haven't even ever had a discussion about that, and we can't see them. So, I don't know how we would know that. So, for me, there are ways of delivering items. I guess you can't use the mail if it's a prohibited federal issue, but typically medications like that are delivered by that type of a manner, not person-to-person deliveries. So,
Madam Chair?
Yes.
May I?
Yes.
My name is David Kotler. As some of you may know from my previous speaking at the last meeting, I am the Chief Compliance Officer and one of the co-founders of Solurge Inc. I think to quote Mr. Marrero from last time, this is one of the most complete applications he had seen. In terms of a delivery plan, it was included in probably the 58 pages worth of security plan that went to and was signed off by the chief. Additionally, in our supplemental materials that were submitted October 5th of this year, we included a 3 or 4 page supplemental delivery plan for review by the commission and anybody else that wanted to take a look at it. I have another hard copy should you wish to see it. There are a couple facts I'd like to point out and talk to you about your ordinance a little bit. We specifically, and we were transparent in requesting delivery because it is provided by your ordinance, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how to address ordinances and the intent also of ordinance writers. But first, I want to talk about a couple facts. The fact is the city of Holyoke has in it patients that are incapable of getting to medical marijuana facilities for their medicine. The fact is, in surrounding cities, there are RMDs who are delivering to patients in Holyoke. And those are companies that you have absolutely no oversight on. And what we would like to do is give you the ability to have oversight on a company that is within the jurisdiction of the city of Holyoke who wishes to help patients who can't get their medicine either due to physical restrictions or inability through transportation. 2 things further to point out. By not allowing that, you are giving up 3% of the gross revenue that you're entitled to under your host city agreement and your agreements with the RMDs to another RMD in another city. You are giving up the ability for us to honor the commitment we made to this city in hiring residents from Holyoke, an additional 3 to 4 and potentially 5 employees, to another RMD in another city. So I think it's important to note these. I've sat through a number of commission meetings. I've heard a lot of dissension, but one thing from every man and woman in the council that I've heard is we have an economic issue here. And so let's keep that in mind, that in fact, if we're looking to do what's in the best economic interests of the city, let's not give away 3% to another city in terms of delivery, and let's employ folks from Holyoke that are capable of staffing some of these positions. At the end of the day, if we're looking at what an ordinance means, we look first, and you have very able counsel sitting at the table, and I urge you to consult her. You look at the clear language of the ordinance, and the clear language in the ordinance under section, I believe it's MMD, is that it permits the distribution of medical cannabis in compliance with 105 CMR 725, which specifically allows an RMD, as we are a provisional RMD license holder, to deliver and dictates how that should be done under the Code of Massachusetts. If one feels, and a court were to feel, that the language in an ordinance is unclear, they then look to the intent of the drafter. You have the opportunity to look to the drafter of your ordinance. And I think if asked, Mr. Moreira would tell you the intent was to allow for delivery within your ordinance. So you have both the clear language of the ordinance that allows it, and you have the intent that the ordinance allow it. And so what I'm asking you as council people to give your recommendation to the full council is that delivery be permitted for medical use by a company that's in your city, from which you can realize the economic benefit from it, both in terms of revenue and employing people in Holyoke, and that you help patients who truly need it. There's no downside to this. Frankly, it may alleviate some of the traffic that folks feel may be happening.
Oh.
Well, if somebody's not driving in or coming in to walk in and parking a car to do that, or on the street, and it's being delivered, then you have less traffic.
But you would be driving in and out all the time.
Right, so
to
here's
do
how
the
it actually
delivery.
works in play. A nondescript white van picks up in the morning and leaves for the day and makes scheduled deliveries throughout the day. So that's a very limited impact on traffic, one that mitigates the potential concerns, I think, that our neighbors might have. So the reality is, it's difficult to articulate what the downside is in terms of allowing delivery. It's certainly something that's allowed for, and I'd suggest it's something that you consider allowing for, because you haven't done it in the past, and you mentioned one that I was not aware of, candidly, but to my understanding, we were the first RMD that has sought a special use permit to affirmatively seek a delivery license. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I know how these things work in reality, and so I can address those certainly for you if there's any further questions. But it seemed like in the last hearing that most of that which we were discussing in terms of our special use permit were okay. It left this delivery piece to discuss, and I'm happy to discuss it in any way. But I feel that we're giving up economic benefit and potentially harming those that could be helped by the delivery service, because it does do some good. It does serve a purpose. It's not some kid on a couch, who's hoping within 10 minutes to get his delivery. It just doesn't work that way. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. As one of the crafters of the ordinance, I can say that the intent around delivery was for the manufacturers to be delivering to the other people that were selling the marijuana. It was not envisioned to be to individuals. As a crafter of the ordinance, I'm talking about intent. So the language may say something else, but you're speaking to the intent of it, and that was the intent. And that is one of the reasons why we have put the stipulations that we have, and people may choose to disagree as things evolve, but that has been the basis for the conditions that we have placed on the special permits to date. But I take your point. Counselor Lisi.
So I was at the drafting table as well, and I wouldn't say that, in my mind, there was any intent to limit deliveries. I think that the applicant makes a really compelling case in terms of the gross revenues that we would be able to realize, or the percentage of gross revenues that we'd be able to realize through the host community agreement. I think that delivery is going to be something akin to like a FedEx operation or UPS operation, where there's packages that are loaded up into a vehicle and then distributed throughout the day. I like the idea of creating a handful of jobs related to the delivery. If we don't seize the opportunity to capture the monies that we could receive through the host community agreement for this operator, somebody else is going to be operating the distribution business and taking advantage of customers and revenue and opportunities that our city could be utilizing and capturing. So I don't think that we should be punishing any particular applicant because of a need to be equitable across the conditions that we put on different applicants. Because number one, I don't think that any other, it came up in one other discussion, but in most cases, no one had explicitly asked for the ability to deliver medical cannabis to clients in the area. Additionally, it's not a hard process to amend a special permit. So anyone who seeks that ability to be able to provide the service, the delivery service of medical cannabis, can come before this body and request an amendment to their special permit, and it's not a difficult process. We've already seen at least one amendment, one applicant come through for an amendment to their special permit, and it was very straightforward. So I don't think we should be punishing because of the lack of action or lack of foresight that we've had on previous applications, in order to make everything level, because people that are interested can come forward and create that level playing field for themselves if there is, again, that interest.
Councilor Sullivan.
Yeah, I also feel that we're putting a little too much emphasis on the 3% revenue on this delivery side. It's the human factor here too. We're talking about, would we willingly not make home deliveries to someone, a diabetic or someone suffering from a debilitating disease? It's the same, someone suffering from epilepsy or PTSD, to restrict their ability to get home delivery on something like this. So I think it's a lot more than just the dollar and cents here involved, but it's the intent of it. It's a medical distribution. This isn't a recreational, like they're calling up and getting a pizza or Chinese food sent to their house. So I think we have to look at it in that light also.
Well, the light I'm looking at it from is safety and security one, and you do have a plan, and we had some submitted to us in the past, and then it became a discussion point that we couldn't know what the safety security plans were due to proprietary knowledge relative to the system and not wanting it to be public and such things as that.
May I address that?
Yes.
We had actually submitted in our October, I think it's second submittal, through the clerk to the departments, our transportation plan. I can show you another copy of it. So much of that is addressed in that separate plan that came to you all. And I'm happy you should have a copy within your binder, but just in case.
We possibly do. It's a very large binder. Is it there? I can see it.
I will also mention, I don't know that I mentioned it specifically in that plan. I've used it in other active companies. We anticipate body cameras. So what happens is, just by way of example, upon delivery, which is a two-person job essentially, one of the deliverers wears a body camera. It's the way we do it in Florida for deliveries. We were really started off as a delivery state. And that records the transaction. It protects both the deliverer, because no one can say that person touched me inappropriately, that person stole something from the house, and it protects the company from a compliance standpoint, because now you can see that you have the patient, you can match the patient to the ID, you can match the patient to the medical card, and so that completes the transaction. If you wanted to look at the details in the plan, that's probably the only thing that I didn't mention, but everything else in terms of this type of security in the nondescript van, lock boxes, lock, stock, and barrel is really in that. I mean, look, this isn't something we're making up. This is something that's a tried and true process for deliveries in regulated jurisdictions. And so it's paramount, frankly. We don't want to put our people at risk, and we want to be able to service patients in a safe manner.
Well, in regulated industries, people are able to send it through the mail, and it's a very secure and not carrying it in the public and traveling on the streets with a van.
Right. This is more regulated.
Of
This is the most
medication.
regulated industry I've ever been involved in.
Well, what I'm pushing back on is there's highly regulated medications that are safely mailed to people who need them that cannot leave their place of residence to obtain them.
Which is
And
actually probably a worse method, because then the kid gets into the mailbox and suddenly the kid's on Ritalin when he shouldn't be. And so this is actually a better method than that. It's the one instance where the federal kind of prohibitions work in our favor if we're talking about safety. Because we're more regulated, we don't have the risk of this falling into the wrong hands. We don't have the risk of this falling into a minor's hands, because you have direct contact. It's actually a safer way and a better way of delivery, believe it or not.
I won't.
And I get it maybe on the not
That's not
side
the
versus the
purpose of
believe
our
it side. I
hearing,
get it.
Is not to have a debate.
Sure, I understand. But it's part of knowledge, and then it helps, I think, you make your decisions, and luckily, I'm capable of giving you some of those answers. And if I can do that in this back and forth, I'm happy to do it.
Do you want to hear from the public?
Is there any, Councilor Bartley wishes to be
No,
recognized.
I'll hear from the public first, if you want. Rather hear from the public,
Well-
then I'll ask a question. I'd rather have the public go first.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I believe there are some members of the public here who wish to speak relative to this application. So you can just come to the mic, give your name and address, and we'll hear your points.
Frank Daly again, 109 Pennsylvania Ave. I just wanted to comment that the actual having a licensed delivery is a lot safer. There are a lot of black market delivery operations currently in operation all over the towns here.
Well, I
And they
figured
aren't
that.
following the regulations, they aren't following the guidelines.
We
and
live
they're
with it every day.
not following the limitations. So allowing legalized delivery will actually subvert the black market as well. So there's products out there that aren't being tested and are being sold to your constituents, could be entirely unsafe. So from a safety perspective, having a licensed delivery standpoint or delivery company would increase the safety of your town.
This is Holyoke you're in.
Yes.
With one of the most serious drug issues in the state, so
Yes, but
we
with
know
the-
what's going on relative to what's going on in the street.
Right. And these are the ways to prevent those black markets from continuing as well.
Good evening, I'm Rob Bernard, U.S. Sabaki. We're directly across from Solurge on across Garfield Street. In the realm of delivery, if their guy is making 40, 50 deliveries a day, that's 40 or 50 less cars that are coming into the industrial park looking for parking places. That's great, because my biggest concern is getting that 53-foot trailer down Beaulieu Street and then down Garfield Street to make deliveries. We get deliveries between 15 and 20 a day. That is our biggest concern. I hope it's diluted. I think what the way I look at it is, like, I see all these numbers in Northampton, in Leicester, and I hope your guys are not diluted and you guys are that successful. That's great. But if that does happen, that's going to be a lot of people from the retail side coming into the industrial park. And it's been an industrial park for, back since it was created in the 50s. And we and the other members of the industrial park, we do have a lot of tractor trailer traffic. And those streets in the industrial park, Stebbins, Berkshire, Beaulieu, Garfield, they're narrow. They're not the full, same width as Main Street and such. And if there's a chance that there's this overflow of traffic coming in, the overflow is going to park on the public streets. That's going to make it very congested for that 53-foot trailer to make the turn from Stebbins onto Beaulieu or from Beaulieu onto Garfield, just to do regular business. That puts people's cars at risk, people at risk that are walking along, because there's no sidewalks in the industrial park itself. There's sidewalks along Main Street. So there's just some of those concerns that if it can be addressed with some of the special, pardon?
Conditions.
Right, those conditions that were talked about previously, that's great. We're just making sure that these things get heard and that we're able to address them prior to them launching their business, which is great.
So
Because more business is better, especially in our area. You know, those buildings were dilapidated, they were empty, they weren't being used. They've already started, you know, putting on a new roof, doing all sorts of work. East Coast Farms doing the same thing, improving the building. It's making it a better industrial park, but we're just concerned about doing business and making it safe for our employees and their customers.
Okay, so to your point about those roads being narrow and the tractor trailer trucks having to get down, and to the point that my recollection, and I could be corrected, that the applicants are planning to use street parking because there's, you know, if the parking lot is full. If cars were parked on both sides of the streets, and I'm missing one of them, I think. I got Stebbins, Beaulieu, Garfield.
And Berkshire.
Berkshire. So if cars theoretically, because as we talked about in the last public hearing, we're trying to think about the worst case scenario so that whatever we set up on the special permit prevents it and allows everybody to be co-business partners without impinging on each other. Would it, in order for those big trucks to get down and be able to access that dock, I guess it would be, would the one side of the street need to be free for those big tractor trailers to get down and be able to get into the dock? Or
That would be more concern for Hazen Paper, for US Sabaki, and, you know, it would be a concern for Hazen, where their dock is located, and I'll let John speak to that, but for Sabaki, all the deliveries are made on the backside of our facility, so they're turning from Maine onto Beaulieu and then turning onto Garfield. So they just have to kind of, you know, snake
be
that
able
turn.
to get around?
And if parking was on Beaulieu all the way out to the intersection with Maine, that could be a problem. Or if it's right up on the corners of Garfield and Beaulieu, that would be a problem for that 53-foot trailer trying to make that turn.
Okay, thanks.
John Hazen again, 717 Main Street. So we're in a butter to Solurge. Rob is exactly right. The way that our dock is accessed is that the truck essentially makes a three-point turn to back into the dock. It's you know, it needs a fairly wide berth to make that turn. Again, we're very concerned about you know, the parking situation. Just looking to Northampton and Leicester. I'm optimistic that the cannabis business is going to be very strong in Holyoke. It makes a lot of sense. We are the crossroads. It's hard to imagine long lineups of people on Beaulieu Street and Stebbins the way that we've got in Northampton and you know, out to Main Street. It does not seem, you know, as conducive to that. So, you know, I have to say I'm extremely worried about this and the impact that it will have you know, on our ability to get trucks in and out and to get employees in and out.
So given that concern, if one side of the street, or I'm just trying to figure out if we're putting conditions on a special permit that's not going to then negatively impact on the businesses that are there being able to do business with the trucks getting in and out, what that would look like.
Well, in talking to the police chief, if there's no parking signage in the right locations, then the police will be able to manage the problem. So, you know, how that signage gets up, you know, I don't understand that part of it, but I think that is quite important.
Right, and I mean, what we're looking to do is mitigate, you know, with the issuing of the special permit, so we don't end up with a problem we have to solve later.
Yeah.
Marcos?
If I may, to complement what's being discussed, we recently had the opportunity to meet with John Hazen and his team from Hazen Paper and hear his concerns. What we're looking to do is, as we get closer to opening, and what other cities have done is that they've enacted a plan for the opening rush. We will probably be bringing something forward to the city council as staff as far as more detailed no parking areas in the zone. We were particularly mindful of disallowing conditions that would somehow interfere with the truck traffic and the turning radiuses. So making clear the setbacks that need to happen on the right of way. So even when you have conditions where you want to allow people to park, you still want to make sure that they're not parking too close to the curb cut. So this is something that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks and months, to have a plan in place, not only that has like standard operating procedures, whether it's in Springdale Industrial Park or anywhere else, as far as traffic, managing traffic, but very specifically on this site, we're going to be going down with the Holyoke Police Chief or his designee, the city engineer, and planning, and kind of getting detail oriented. But we want to bring it in one package and not just do it like street by street when it relates to Springdale Industrial Park. So you will get something to that effect, because the power that you have as special permit granting authority on a particular private property is not the same one as the power you also exercise as the regulator of the public right of way. So we would want to bring a package to you that says, this is what we're recommending on how you regulate the public right of way in this area.
It's effective.
But we could still, as part of the conditions of the special permit, put in a condition that somehow stipulates that whatever increased parking, traffic, et cetera, that they have is not going to interfere with the traffic flow and the ability of the trucks to access their business and for the employees to get to work. And it's similar to what we just did with that last special permit.
And I think the language that you created for any traffic flow issues will need to be mitigated by the applicant per order of the HPD.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is that would be a separate sort of parallel process.
Yeah, giving the committee a heads up that you'll probably receive something, because I heard something about like doing it now and not doing it later. I just wanted to let you know, later you will get something from staff to address and get ahead of any potential problems there. So it is a heads up that how we regulate the right of way, no parking signs, for example, that would be enforceable by the Holyoke Police Department, that would be something that you would see at a later date.
Right, but I just want to make sure, if we're granting the special permit, that we create a situation before we get through that process that is not putting the existing businesses in a bind until we get that done. That's my concern. I want to make sure that we are preventing the problem. I hear what you're saying. Right. You want to fix it in a planful way, and that would involve...
right, and all this would happen before anyone opens.
It's an opening day plan.
Right, and may I just mention, look, we had a traffic plan, unlike, maybe other applicants that you've had in the past number of months, that was pretty comprehensive and took into account the existing uses by the trucks and those type of things. So I think a few things to mention. We do have sidewalks. We have worked through a couple extra parking spaces that don't interfere with the trucks coming in. So these are things, we're not thinking about this in a vacuum. I mean, we've spent a fair bit of time and money addressing the existing use by trucks, how they turn, and how that might be affected by increased capacity. I can tell you, and this isn't going to make anybody from the paper company sleep better at night. I've been in this process in states as far as California in this country and as far as Zimbabwe outside of this country. And there's one thing I can guarantee. You're not going to see what you saw, and I will guarantee it. I'm on the record that people can see it at home. You're not going to have what you had in Northampton and in other places in Massachusetts, because by the time Solurge and some of these other facilities open, it's going to be a different playing field that we're playing on. And so short of our parents and our friends and family and all of the other people that are coming in on day one, which again, we can account for and work with planning, and maybe we choose to open on a Saturday when no trucks are coming. And so that's our first big day when we're cutting the ribbon with the Chamber of Commerce. That may be on a Saturday, frankly. Okay? And so...
Just to clarify, trucks do come in on Saturdays.
So maybe we'll, you know, but those are things that we can be proactive and talk about, work with planning to mitigate maybe on day one. But I guarantee you on day 7, we're not going to have what we have in Northampton and other places in Massachusetts, because we won't be one of 2 opening on the whole East Coast. And it's going to be a different playing field. And I can assure you of that based on former experience.
And so then to that point, then it sounds like you'd be comfortable with the conditions that we placed on the prior applicant relative to traffic, parking, and police traffic management if it was needed then?
I'm confident enough that it won't be needed, that I'm confident agreeing to that kind of condition.
Can I, just as a point of procedure, I think that we closed the public hearing at the last meeting, and we were only really had on the table discussion of delivery, so maybe we need to vote to suspend the necessary rules and allow the public to speak, just to be on procedurally correct.
I take your point, but what had also happened last time was there was a late communication that got entered through email after 6 o'clock while the public hearing was going on, and then it was closed, and it was to the point of the traffic and the parking and that. So we're not really taking in new information. We're hearing the concerns of the people as we're debating the conditions. But I take your point, and if you would feel better procedurally to make that motion, that would be fine.
So motion to suspend the necessary rules and allow the public to speak.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and we've already done it.
Just covering all bases, folks.
But I take your point. So are there any other questions from anybody? Is there anybody else from the
Public.
Hi, I'm Andrew Woods, plant engineer at Hazen Paper Company as well. I just wanted to refer back to Mr. Hazen's concerns. Really, we welcome any business, any new business in the industrial park. What we're solely trying to do is make sure that our business continues as it has from a truck standpoint and from an employee parking standpoint. Our business in our industrial park is kind of unique. It's not kind of like a Westover where there's more and ample spots. Our dock situation is more unique. I think what you may find with Bob Parent, and we welcome you guys to come take a look at how our trucks do enter our facility. You may find that there may need to be additional, restrictions on parking as opposed to further than 30 feet from certain intersections, simply just to make sure that our business and our trucks do, continue to operate as such. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, I guess we're, everybody speak?
I
just
think everybody's all set.
I just want to make sure
of
the public. Right, so I think we're just talking about deliveries. Again, I apologize, Madam Chair, for missing my first meeting in 2 years is the last time we met.
You've had excellent attendance.
You caught up quickly.
Yeah. So I'm just going to try to, first of all, I haven't thanked, so thank you for, you've been here several times, so thank you for your investment to Holyoke and for U.S. Subaki. We thank you as well for taking over Acme Chain, and of course, I think the last time we passed a TIF was for U.S. Subaki too, so we did you guys a favor as well. So I think we're not even, but there's that. As far as deliveries go, Madam Chair, I'm not here to break a tie between you and another counselor, but that's why we write things down in ordinance. And in 7.10.5, in no event shall an RMD or an OMMD facility be open to the public, and no sale or other distribution of marijuana shall occur upon the premises or via delivery from the premises, except to an OMMD. So that's why we write down ordinances and put them into law. It wasn't my memory. And we didn't, with all due respect to everybody here, the legislation was crafted by those of us, at least 3 of us here. Juan's new to the board. So there's that. Also, I think it's, to my friend Mike's point, yes, of course it's a human element, and that is why we put in those conditions early on. It's because we want to make sure there's for Holyoke residents and Holyoke, yes, we know that, of course. But I think, Madam Chair, not only is it an ordinance, it's a matter of basic fairness. Every other applicant has said no deliveries, every single one. And now, I heard the plea, my heart goes out, but I can't rely on the OPED chair and say, you have the power to do whatever you want to do. Okay, I guess we do, but, the ordinance says what it says, no deliveries. And now if we're going to change something, I don't want to just change it on a whim because somebody comes up to the mic and says, you're going to lose 5 jobs, or, I want to have some understanding of what parameters we as a board put on deliveries to from marijuana facilities. We said it at the very first meeting when Attorney Farragut was here. We said it is a brave new world. We're trying to figure out as best we can. And as my friend Councilor Lisi said very well and succinctly, we can amend special permits, and it's an easy process to amend special permits. But we don't even have anybody up and running, Madam Chair. And now we're going to amend our ordinance which says no deliveries? I am not going to vote for that, especially to waive what I feel is a very clear language in the ordinance, that we don't allow deliveries. Now, I would be happy to co-file an order with Councilor Lisi to say, to amend the ordinance to consider having deliveries and what parameters they're on. But there's no possibility of me voting for that, and I don't think any councilor should vote for it because the ordinance is clear on it. We're not waiving the permit. I don't know where this notion came of no flexibility. It says no deliveries. Those 2 words are there. So that's my opinion. It's not my opinion. It's what's written into the ordinance. So, but beyond that, it's basic fairness. When we don't even have an industry up and running, we put it on a condition to every single other applicant, Madam Chair, without exception. I think we should remain consistent until at least these are up and running. We can see what's going on with the other issues. Written out, whether raised appropriately tonight by the major corporations in Holyoke. And I think we addressed those earlier, and I would hope we would put a similar condition as the ones we put on for the prior applicant at Sargeant Street to this applicant at Beaulieu Street.
Thank you, Councilor Bartley.
That ordinance that was just cited, and then I apologize because I'm getting old, but Councilor had cited to a particular section of your ordinance that prohibits
7.10.5, Part C.
So I'm going on a limb, and perhaps legal can address this. I'm not sure if that's your old ordinance or the one that was amended. Because I have your amended ordinance, I don't see it in there. And if it's in there, then you're right. We can't get what we're asking for, but I don't see it.
So all I can say is relative to the amended ordinance, we crafted a medical marijuana ordinance. When recreational marijuana came to the fore, we brought into the medical marijuana ordinance the other categories. We did not otherwise change that ordinance.
No, we didn't.
And we've had to fix one prior, and maybe we have to fix this one too, but we did not change any other aspects of that ordinance other than to bring in the other categories.
Well, actually, we've restructured the entire ordinance because we
To
really.
bring in the other categories, but we didn't have a discussion and change the intent or the language around these other activities.
What was the site again? 710.5?
710.5.
Was there a subsection to 710.5? I'm sorry?
See.
So the new ordinance does not have a 710.5C? 710.5.1C?
So again, this, Madam Chair, whatever, we had this issue happen before.
Yes, we did.
With another ordinance.
Yes, we did.
Which, Marcos, we wrote it, it's in there, it hasn't changed. So that has not been amended.
I'm looking, I mean, if we're going off of the same facts.
I'm looking at it too. So, but we didn't change it. I mean, I just read it. What do you want me to tell you?
It may be an old version. I mean.
But we didn't amend
Okay.
that.
It was completely replaced.
But when they were doing Muni code,
please,
we
this
had
is-
the issue with
okay.
Muni code. as you recall.
So,
Madam Chair, I'm just trying to establish the same basis of facts. There's a fact here that's been saying, is it in the ordinance or not? I mean, it's germane to my role here, telling you what the law is. I'm not looking at it in Munich code. It's the last zoning ordinance that we updated to the website as of October. This is what the law says. And so, I mean, it was to my surprise. So I was looking at it and I cannot find it. That's the only thing I'm saying. So if it's here, it's here. But what the vote that occurred was to replace the zoning ordinance to section 7.10. So that language is not in the latest version. I'm not seeing it. If it's there, then I just want to locate it. That's all.
okay, so what I will state to you on the public record is that there was no intentional change of that ordinance from the original language when the recreational marijuana laws were passed, and we simply added in the various categories into our medical marijuana ordinance, which was a model ordinance that we created and was widely used in others crafting theirs. So that is a separate matter for us to address as a council. We're finishing our debate relative to setting conditions under this special permit application at this point, and we need to address that other matter separately. I mean, we can't address it here now. It's not possible.
Unless I would suggest our delivery portion is being denied because it's relied on an old section that's been replaced by an ordinance that you have amended. And that's a matter of law, and that's my only concern. If it's being denied on other grounds, I'm okay with that. You get to make those decisions. But if it's being denied on that there's a prohibition in your ordinance that doesn't exist because your ordinance, by virtue of the way ordinances work and amendments work, no longer exists.
We
That's a different
understand
story.
how ordinances work and how amendments work, with all due respect. Yes. Counselor Anderson Burgos.
What I'm trying to figure out is, where are you locating and where are you locating, and why are we getting two different ordinance? I need to look at that because I need to figure out where are you getting the document from, and where are you searching for your document from?
Okay, but from a procedural point of view, if we have an issue with our ordinance, we will need to correct it as we have corrected them in the past. Separate from that, under the special permit discussion that we've had relative to deliveries, we've had the same discussion more than once, separate from the reference that was just made to the ordinance.
Right, but this has happened in the past, so I'm trying to eliminate this from ever happening again because it's an embarrassment.
Yes, so the solution to the problem is that when you amend your ordinances, you do not replace them in whole. You simply take the old language, you take the new language, you do it side by side. There is no replacing in whole, because this appears to perhaps be the second time this has happened.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to figure out.
It's not a good way to do the language. Unintended consequences occur. We've fixed the other one. Counselor Lisi?
Thank you. So in terms of intent, I just want to make it really clear that while it may not have been your intent, I don't appreciate you speaking for every member of the committee who had a hand in crafting the ordinance. And everybody who was a part of the ordinance committee, as well as the full city council, had adopted the changes that completely restructured the ordinances related to medical marijuana establishments, retail establishments, and also the production, cultivation, and research facilities. So, I mean, there are things that didn't get built into the ordinance that I would have liked to have seen. I wanted a more liberal zoning for the marijuana facilities instead of being restricted to the IG. But we all saw and read, hopefully, the ordinance that we signed off on, both in committee and in the full city council. And if the letter of the law allows for deliveries, or at least does not prohibit deliveries, and we have an applicant that's looking for it, I personally, it may not be your intent or your desire, but I personally would like to be able to cast a vote in favor of that. I don't think that you can say that's not what the law says, or that's not what I meant to say when that's what we passed. That is
not what we passed.
That is what we passed. I mean, it may not be what you thought you were passing, but that's what we passed.
This is not the place to debate this. We need to address that.
No, but I
through a
don't
separate
appreciate you also speaking for me and saying that this is not the intent, or this is not what we wanted, because I was a part of this committee, and I'm generally happy with the structure, and it is a model ordinance. I hear people talking about how streamlined and straightforward it is, and people have been borrowing from it, so I'm actually very proud of the work that we did to craft that ordinance, even though it's not perfect in my eyes in terms of where the uses are allowed, and a couple of other things that I would have liked to have seen, but it works for us.
As is the case for all of us, it was
Sure.
a compromise. And as I stated, it was my recollection of the intent.
Okay. So,
So on the matter of the special permit,
I think we have
we
to,
need a motion and we need conditions.
well, before we create conditions, because if you're, again, ready to deny the ability for the applicant to deliver based on the prohibition in the ordinance, then that's not the reality of the
That is
situation
not-
that we're dealing
Right, but
with.
that isn't the basis I stated in the first place.
But, sure, so you can deny that, and I can motion to approve it.
Yes, and we can all vote whichever way we see appropriate. That's what we do.
But I just want to make sure that it's on the table and not taken away from me and the ability that I have to vote in favor of
You
that.
have the ability to make any motion and any vote that you wish.
So I guess we're at the point in the meeting where we make motion. So I motion that we approve the special permit for Solurge Inc.
And I second that motion.
And if anybody else wants to create conditions, they're more than welcome to, but I would like to approve it. And their application includes delivery at this point in time of medical.
We do not have a provision for RMCE that's noted on the order that's before us on the agenda.
Sure. So amend the application to reflect that we do not have an RMCE and strike it from the application.
Second.
Any other discussion? Any other motions?
I thought we were just on that one motion.
We have, the motion before us is to approve the special permit for MME, MMD, RMRE, and deliveries. That is the motion before us for the special permit for 650 Beaulieu Street. If there's no further discussion, if there's no other motions, then I'll ask for a vote on the motion. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Is there a second motion?
I'll
that
make a
anybody
motion that
wishes to make?
we grant a special permit with the similar conditions that we just laid out for Boston Bud. I think they were all the standard conditions that we put in, and I think there was a couple of traffic mitigating conditions that we added as well, which I thought were reasonable, and which the applicant disagreed to.
And what would that be for? The special permit, what would it be for?
The special permit, so I don't think we have an RMCE, so it'll be MME, MMD, and RMRE.
I will second that motion. All in favor?
What is the motion then?
The motion is to approve the special permit with the conditions as noted for the prior applicant for MME, MD, and RMRE.
Well, because we don't have an RMCE, I'm not sure what that is.
We don't have.
We don't have the
that.
RMCE.
That is,
RMCE.
we can't grant a special permit for that. So we have a motion, and it's been seconded. All in favor?
Wait, I'm
Aye.
still trying to understand what was motion. So the MME, MMD, RMRE, along with the 5 conditions that we had typically put on all, and the 2 new ones?
Plus the conditions relative to the traffic patrol and the off-site parking and the traffic mitigation relative to DPW recommendations relative to truck access. would be the additional conditions. That's the motion before us now.
Sure.
So, all in favor?
I'm going to
Aye.
say no.
All opposed? No.
So it's a 2-2, and I would recommend that we send it to full committee without a recommendation and let the full body understand the dispute before us.
Motion to table.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
No. It's only.
I make a motion to refer to legal to get clarification relative to the special permit and the ordinance if we can't.
I'd like
move
to
on
do
it.
that before the full city council.
I can
Why
do
don't we
that right
table it till,
now.
why don't we table it till hear back from legal for next meeting?
I can do that right now.
Motion to suspend the necessary rules and allow legal to speak and settle the dispute about the ordinance language.
Might as well.
I'm looking at 710 off of Municode, which is updated as of not that long ago. They've been very good at updating, and I don't see where there's a 710.5C. It's 710.5, and then it goes on to more numbers, 1A, B, C, 2A, B, C, D.
I think that's the dispute.
I don't think we could punish the applicant that's before us who's created an application that fits with the language of our ordinance.
Well, we can't move it without a motion to move it, so it remains in committee if we don't take another action.
Well, look, I mean, look, I'll be happily stand corrected, but if that's the case, but the one I was looking at certainly had the language. I don't remember amending this to allow deliveries.
Does it have the date?
I have no
We didn't.
I have no problem standing corrected, but my point's still my point. It's a matter of fairness, because we've said no deliveries to every single other applicant. Every single one.
Yeah, it's not about.
I
the
mean,
legal
it was a standard one, and now you want to make a change, fine, but we don't really have any parameters relative to it. If that's it, listen, your vote's your vote. Do what you got to do. I'm saying we've had the standard condition, and I don't think there's a debate about that. We've had the same condition for no deliveries for every single one, and now you want to change it. Oh, okay, that's your call. That's not my call.
May I?
Counselor Anderson Burgos.
But were we looking at the old version
It
of
wasn't
the
about
ordinance?
that.
But that's,
It wasn't about that.
right,
One
so,
did.
but we're saying we didn't offer it or give it to anybody else, right?
One did seek
It was asked for,
It
and we
was
put it
asked
as a
for.
standard,
we said no.
no.
Right, but based on an old ordinance?
No, based on.
It was a condition on the
how we're
permit.
Reviewing the
It was a condition on the
business.
permit.
Okay.
But if I may.
Counselor Lisi.
But I think to Juan's point was the fact that we were making this a condition, no deliveries, a condition, in some ways a reiteration of what some people felt that the ordinance was stating in the first place. So was it just an additional assurance to something that folks thought were there, as opposed to understanding that there was room in the ordinance to allow for deliveries?
I'd even concede that. I would concede that point. You can't take away the fact that we've had that same condition for every single one. You can't deny that, because that is true. And we have no other operation up and running. And now all of a sudden, we have a fine argument. Great. Every other operator could have the same argument. But we've imposed a condition upon their permit. Every single one. And now you want to flip it. Now that's your call, that's your vote, and you're entitled to it. I'm giving you an historical fact. I'll concede every other point. But the fact is, the conditions have stood. If you want to change it, fine. I'm not going to at this point, because we don't have any data relative to any of this going forward.
Right, and as we've said, it's easy to amend
So,
a special permit.
Yeah, so listen, your vote's your vote. I respect it. I'm just not going to support it.
But
Councilor
right
Sullivan
now,
wants to
this
be
is going
recognized.
nowhere. Counselor Sullivan?
Yeah. Counselor Bartley's correct. There's no arguing. We've imposed that on every single applicant. I can't remember, though, any applicant specifically asking to have it. I distinctly remember nobody arguing to get it either. And it seems like, to me, from my recollection, it's something we just added on, and everybody said, fine, it's not going to affect us. So
Did have a
if they want
preference
in my thinking, if this got approved and anyone wanted to come back and for an amendment on theirs, it should be considered. But that's just a point I want to make. But the other thing, too, is I would really hate to see this thing held up. If the committee can't reach a decision, let's not table this thing. Let's at least move it to the full body. It'll give a week or so to answer some of the other questions, and let's at least get it out in front of the full body.
Well, we're willing to move it and give them 95% of what they're looking for. That was the last motion that was denied.
So if I may, I'd like to address the applicant directly. So Mr. Cotter, I you know, the preference that I have is to allow for delivery and allow Holyoke to utilize the revenues that we would see through the host community agreement and also the employees. That's my preference. It's not the majority of this committee, and so in terms of creating a timely process for you to move forward on your project, would it be preferred to pass it at the 95% version that Councilor Vacon's proposing and then coming back before us for an amendment, or would you rather wait?
So I'm going to address your points in two ways, realizing we've been here a long way. Our amendment will essentially be us taking the plan that we submitted in October, resubmitting it, and relying on the same ordinance that we've been relying on. So our amendment will be no different than what we've done up to this point. In terms of, are we willing to basically take the 95% to move it forward, I need to phone a friend. So can I have 10 seconds? For those of you old enough to remember that show.
Yes, I remember it.
Shark Tank. Okay, so if I may, just a point of clarification. From what I'm understanding in terms of the, I don't want to call it a deadlock, but the deadlock, it's either 95%, we get everything but delivery, and it moves forward with our special use permit, and we have the choice to then resubmit or do whatever we're going to do. But it's not to send it to the council as a whole to essentially hear all of these issues and address across a body. Am I understanding that correctly?
How would we get to that point? Being
Well,
we have a four-person panel and we have two people on one side and two on the other. How, if we keeps getting tabled, can we ask Councilor Sullivan to participate, being that he's been here?
It's a, right.
Okay.
Sorry.
If the fifth member was here, we wouldn't be in this.
I get that.
So it advances to the full council either with or without a recommendation. I had motioned that we send it to full council without a recommendation, and that failed because we had a deadlock there as well. The only way to get it before the city council for the meeting on the 18th is to take the 95% deal that Councilor Vacon and Bartley are putting on the table. And perhaps the full council would be interested in amending the recommendation of the committee to allow for delivery. That's a possibility.
I understand what you're saying. I'm inclined based on what I've heard from all of you, and I appreciate the opportunity that we would take the 95%, be referred to the city council, and we'll address either through to our plea to the city council as a whole or an amendment, and we'll address it separately if that's okay. And thank you for your consideration and allowing those portions to go through.
Motion?
Yeah, whatever I said earlier. That's my motion.
So, and I'll second, the motion is to approve the special permit for Solurge, for MME, MMD, RMRE, with the conditions as read into the record for the prior applicant, the Bud, Boston Bud, relative to the additional conditions that they will accept DPW recommendations for traffic mitigation to ensure the safe ability of the current businesses to continue to function, that a traffic patrol will be brought in should traffic be impeded in the neighborhood for the abutting businesses, and that should the amount of traffic exceed the capacity of the space, that off-site parking and shuttle services would be provided. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries 4-0, will be going to full council. Thank you.
Thank you. Motion to take up item number 8.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, item 8, we have been advised, requires notice, advertising, public hearing, because it is affecting zoning.
So a motion to table until the proper notice is sent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Motion to take up item number 9.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item 9, followed by Counselor Valentin, that an official petition and notification process be implemented regarding resident parking only requests, such as the petition and notification process in place for speed humps via ordinance at this time. Proposed wording, excuse me, that no resident parking only be established except upon petition to the city council signed by at least 2/3 of the property owners or 2/3 of the registered voters within the impacted segment of a proposed resident parking only street.
Motion to approve this, but put into legal language so we can review the legal language and then, give Crystal, I don't know, can you, Crystal, need a month and a half or something?
Do we want to,
Well, I want to see the language.
Yeah, absolutely want to see the language, but I think that from the previous conversation we had, the speed bump ordinance that this is mimicking seemed to be somewhat onerous for the neighborhood, and I thought we wanted to in some ways scale back the requirements.
No.
No?
No.
No, this is in response to the fact that we passed the resident parking only, and then with the perception that everybody in the neighborhood wanted it, and then we got blowback from 80% of the people in the neighborhood.
Yep.
That do not want it. And so it seemed a safer process to make it a proactive,
Yeah, just a
agreed
point of
upon.
clarification, Madam Chair, may I?
Counselor Bartley?
At the last meeting, and I just want to make sure,
Where this was taken up, it wasn't taken up at the last meeting.
strike that. The last meeting I attended, I missed
Yeah.
I feel bad I missed that meeting. Really, I don't miss
Missed so
any
much.
meetings. But the one right before that, counselors, excuse me, we had, if you recall, on Pine Street between Appleton and Essex, we had a whole to-do about,
So we shrunk it
so
down.
we shrunk that. We didn't take away all the signs. We left up one.
One or two.
We left
and
up
we're
one
waiting for
sign,
legal on it
and we're just
get
waiting
it
for
approved.
the legal language for that one part closest to Pine and Appleton, correct, Madam Solicitor?
Right, which we're finding may be an issue, because you're creating a parking spot for one property. So we're doing some research on that behind the scenes.
Okay, so you'll come back, okay, fine, so we don't have legal, but the point is, we don't have legal language for that, but we didn't delete all of it, we deleted most of it. But that was the point.
I thought we left up two, but.
Well, you're probably right, we left up two, I thought I remember one, but it doesn't matter, I'll defer to you. But the
She's
point
saying
is that
one.
we want to have a more structured,
Process.
yeah, more structured process. I don't want to make it like overly burdensome, but we just have a structured process so we can,
But this process mimics our speed bump process.
Right.
yes.
And I specifically remember members saying that the speed bump process has turned out to be quite onerous for the residents, and that maybe we don't want to create the same sort of like threshold of like signatures and.
Oh, fair point. But I would like to at least see that language in writing.
Okay.
And then if we got it in writing, Rebecca, we could, we can water it down, to your point, if it gets to be way too much.
Because it's like
'Cause
300
all the property owners,
feet
all the.
on every single side.
Yeah,
and-
the whole checklist you have to go through as a resident, yeah, that gets a little
With the
burdensome. But we just felt as ward counselors,
You either have to be in really good touch with enough of the people on the street to know that
Yeah.
they really want it.
yeah, in this
You
case,
know.
It's
that
a good,
wasn't the best
thermometer
result.
read, I guess, the 2/3.
Yeah.
Right,
Because
so my motion is to allow it, put in legal language, and maybe come back in How much time do you need, Crystal?
Well, I'm looking at the proposed order here, and it looks like there's proposed language that Councilor Valentin has provided. Is that?
It's the same as the speed hump.
It's a speed hump language.
Speed hump language.
Well, so the other issue with the speed humps, which we ran into when doing notifications, which if we're drafting this similarly, is that you end up creating this circle of huge area to notify. So you have to decide where the resident parking is going to go, much like where the speed humps are going to go. Then you have to go back and figure out who you need to notify based on where those are going to go. And I imagine this would be similar, and it creates this enormous buffer that we then have to notify all of these people. So
Well, that's what Councilor Lisi was saying, but right, but and we can water that down, but we just want to get some language in front of us.
Perhaps, how about to make her work a little more narrow, how about if we said a petition for a street? So that it's for a street. It's not gonna be for 10 streets, 8 streets, it's gonna be for a street.
I think what we should do is look at the language, the legal language of the speed bump, and draft something new, looking at that as a template, and figure out where we want to go from there. Either so instead of drafting something new and then looking at it, I think we should just look at the speed hump, have a hard copy in front of us, and figure out how to create something new off of that. But instead of having Crystal do it, because Crystal's going to have to make a number of decisions about.
Okay, so fine. So I'll make a motion that we table this for a month.
And get that
And
language
then
in front of us.
between now and then, we could just
And
have the speed bump language in front of us, and we can all make our own 2 cents and just make sausage.
And we can go back to the ward counselor
and have her into.
No, I get her point. I know what
No,
she.
I do too.
I think I know what she's.
She doesn't want this to happen again.
Yeah, she just wants a little more formal process.
That's
Yeah,
the truth.
No, I think it's a very good order. I just want to sort of.
And I would also.
rolling on it.
If we take this up again in a month, it would be great to have the city engineer's recommendations, because I had filed that order asking him to talk broadly about how to manage residential and commercial parking in the downtown area. So maybe we'll have some insights based on other models. So not just like our own city, like speed bump ordinance to look at, but how do other cities create
So a motion would be to take up Councilor Lisi's order to at the same time to get the DPW's engineers' input and take this up in a month, or when the chair lady feels is right.
Well, poor Mike's been at every meeting every night lately, but I try to keep him to the second one, but when we have all these hearings and everything, it's not possible.
Well, the second one in January.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay,
usually
table
try.
to the second one in January. All right. On the motion?
Aye.
Aye, okay. And
Thank you, Assistant.
And then a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.